We are ready to begin.
Thank you, moderator. I want to welcome everyone to the September 11th, 2020 regular meeting of the San Francisco Ethics Commission. Some background info. This meeting is being held by teleconference pursuant to the Governor's Executive Order N-2920 and the 12th supplement to the mayoral proclamation declaring the existence of a local emergency dated February 25th, 2020. Before we proceed further, I'd like to ask the commission staff member Ronald Contreras, who is acting as our moderator, to explain the procedures for today's remote meeting. Ronald?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The minutes of this meeting will reflect that due to the COVID-19 health emergency and to protect commission members, city employees, and the public, the meeting rooms at City Hall are closed. However, commission members and staff will be participating in today's meeting remotely. This precaution is taken pursuant to the various local, state, and federal orders, declarations, and directives. Commission members will attend this meeting through video conference and participate in the meeting to the same extent as if they were physically present. Please note that today's meeting is being live cablecast on SFGov TV and streamed live online at sfgovtv.org/ethicslive. Public comment will be available on each item on this agenda. Each member of the public will be allowed 3 minutes to speak. Comments or opportunities to speak during the public comment period are available via phone call by calling 1-415-655-0001. Again, the phone number is 1-415-655-0001. Access code is 146. Excuse me. 146. Oh my goodness. Access code is 146-565-0260. Again, 146-565-0260, followed by the pound sign, and then press pound again to join as an attendee. You will hear a beep when you are connected to the meeting. You will be automatically muted and in listening mode only. When your item of interest comes up, dial *3 to raise your hand and to be added to the public comment line. You will then hear you have raised your hand to ask a question. Please wait until the host calls on you. The line will be silent as you wait your turn to speak. Please ensure that you are in a quiet location. Before you speak, mute the sound of any equipment around you, including television, radio, or computer. It is especially important that you mute your computer if you are watching via the web link to prevent feedback and echo when you speak. When the system message says, "Your line has been unmuted," this is your turn to speak. You'll hear staff say, "Welcome, caller." We encourage you to state your name clearly. As soon as you begin speaking, you will have 3 minutes to provide your public comment, 6 minutes if you are online with an interpreter. You will hear a bell go off when you have 30 seconds remaining. If you change your mind and wish to withdraw yourself from the public comment line, press *3 again. You will hear the system say, "You have lowered your hand." Once your 3 minutes have expired, staff will thank you and mute you. You will hear your line has been muted. Attendees who wish to speak during other public comment periods may stay online and listen for the next public comment opportunity and should raise their hands to enter the public comment line by pressing *3 when their next item of interest comes up. Public comment may also be submitted in writing and will be shared with the Commission after this meeting has concluded and will be included as part of the official meeting file. Written comments should be sent to ethics.commission@sfgov.org. Once again, written comments should be sent to ethics.commission@sfgov.org. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ronald. And with that, I'm going to call the meeting to order on September 11th. Can you please proceed with item number 1, the commission roll call?
Commissioners, please unmute your microphone so that you can verbally state your presence at today's meeting after your name is called. Chair Ambrose?
Present.
Commissioner Bush?
Present.
Commissioner Chu?
Present.
Vice Chair Lee?
Present.
Commissioner Smith?
Present.
Madam Chair, with 5 members present and accounted for, You have a quorum.
Thank you very much. And welcome to our viewing audience. If folks have the capacity to tune into an Ethics Commission meeting with all that's going on in the city and state, I want to remind everyone, mute your microphone when you're not speaking so that the background noise doesn't come through to our listeners. And with that, I'm going to call agenda item 2, which is public comment on matters appearing or not appearing on the agenda. Members of the public who are already on the line and wish to speak should now dial *3 if you've not already done so to be added to the public comment line. Moderator, can you please proceed with public comment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Ethics Commission is now receiving public comment on agenda item number 2 remotely in this meeting. Each member of the public will have up to 3 minutes to provide public comment. If you joined the meeting earlier to listen to the proceedings, now is the time to get in line to speak. If you have not already, please press *3. It's important that you press *3 only once to enter the queue, as pressing it again will move you out of the public comment line and back into listening mode. Once you are in the queue and are standing by, the system will prompt you when it's your turn to speak. So it's important that you call from a quiet location. Please address your comment to the Commission as a whole and not to individual members. Madam Chair, we are checking to see if there are any calls in the queue.
Thank you very much.
If you have just joined this meeting, we are currently on agenda item number 2, public comment on matters appearing or not appearing on the agenda. You will have 3 minutes to provide your public comment, 6 minutes if you are online with an interpreter. You will hear a bell go off when you have 30 seconds remaining. If you have not already done so, please press *3 to be added to the queue. For those already on hold, please continue to wait until the system indicates you have been unmuted. Madam Chair, there are no calls in the queue.
Thank you very much. With that, then, I'd like to call agenda item number 3, the consent calendar, the draft minutes for the Ethics Commission August 14, 2020 regular meeting. If any members of the public intend to offer public comment for the consent item, they should dial in now and enter *3 to be added to the public comment queue. Item 3 is on consent. This item is considered routine. If a commissioner objects, an item can be removed and considered separately. Does any commission member wish to sever any of the items from consent, of which there is only one, and call it for separate discussion?
This is Commissioner Bush.
Commissioner Bush, you have the floor.
Thank you. I'd like to sever the minutes so that we can have a discussion about the report that we use for minutes.
All right. Thank you. Actually, we don't need a motion or a second on that because any one commissioner can pull something from consent. So I'm going to give you the floor, Commissioner Bush, unless do we want public comment first? I'm going to defer to you on that. Do you want public comment first before you make your point or after?
It doesn't matter to me.
Moderator, do you happen to know if there are any commenters on the queue on the consent item?
Not at this time, Commissioner. Not at this Chair Ambrose.
Okay. All right. And then Commissioner Bush, please go ahead.
Thank you. According to what I see in the admin code, there are certain requirements in minutes, and I want to make sure that we're in compliance with that, and also to ask Deputy City Attorney Shin whether the admin code on that regard applies to the ethics minutes as well. The things that the admin code specifies is that when public comment is given, the name of the person who is willing to be identified is included, and whether or not they are speaking in favor or against a item on the agenda, and whether or not what it is that they have to say about that. So that there's a little bit of descriptive material from whatever the person in the public had to say. That's what the admin code says. The additional to that is, in my view, I think we'd be well suited if the minutes showed if the commissioners made any comments or recommendations so that there's a clarification with the public and the staff and the other commissioners whether changes were adopted at the request of the commissioners. That's the points that I'm raising.
All right, and you would ask for Deputy City Attorney Shen to state whether or not those sunshine ordinance requirements apply to the Ethics Commission. So Andrew, do you want to?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. So just very briefly, and I don't know if Leanne or Pat want to jump in on this as well, but there are meeting minute requirements that apply to the Ethics Commission because it is a charter commission established in the city's charter. So there are requirements such as recording the beginning time of the meeting, end time of the meeting, etc. And Commissioner Bush, you are correct that there is an admin code requirement that requires a very brief summary of a public commenter's comment to the commission. But there is no requirement that there be specificity about which commissioner suggested which changes to the minutes, if any changes are made. That's not required, but I suppose it's up to the commission if they want to pursue that practice. I don't know if
It was not my intention to call us out, just to whether or not the commission itself was requesting changes or deletions on an item.
I'm going to ask for clarification on that because whenever there's a motion to adopt or a motion to adopt with amendments, that, I mean, my understanding is that that would be memorialized in the mission, I mean, in the minutes, and that vote would be, roll call and reflected also in the minutes. I'm a little bit, I just want to be really clear, though, that where we're having a dialogue and building towards a consensus, there's a kind of rapid exchange of ideas and comment. And I worry about the usefulness of having someone memorialize all of that give and take in the written minutes. I know from my own personal experience as a attorney to several different commissions in the city, if I'm looking for legislative intent or documentation of exactly what transpired in building to a resolution, I would go to SFG TV or as a backup to the audio tape, to get the precise exchange of communication. So I just want to make sure that I understand. Are you talking about official motion amendments, second, et cetera, or do you want every specific recommendation that an individual commissioner makes memorialized in the minutes?
No, I'm not looking for every comment to be in the minutes. And you bring up a good point about being able to refer to the tape. So it might be an option at the bottom of the minutes to put a link to the tape so that in addition to what people can see in the minutes, they can also go and listen to the entire proceedings. So I
Right.
would add
And
that.
one thing that's useful too, in SFG TV, they have the agenda, and under the video recordings, you can click on a particular agenda item once you get into SFG TV, and it'll take you to that section of the meeting recording. So you don't have to start at the beginning of the 3 hours and try and find your place.
Right.
But I agree with you, having a link in the minutes that would allow somebody to get to the recording would be a useful reference. And also, I think, where there, anyway, where there's a significant substantive, presentation or a motion, certainly to amend, that we could make it a practice to memorialize that as well.
Thank you.
Chair Ambrose, might I add just a moment, a note for information,
Mhm.
and with a suggestion about next steps, perhaps. We do in the minutes, since we've been remotely meeting, we have added with each agenda item number, a link directly to where on the SF.gov agenda you mentioned. It'll show directly to that agenda item. So we do know that we want to try and point people as quickly as possible to the things that they're looking for. But one of the things that we looked at, I think, we may not in these minutes have fully reflected consistently where commissioners might have had a suggestion or a comment that we should capture. So we can certainly take a look back at these minutes to try and make sure we're consistent with that. And then also the requirement in the admin code for the section 67.16, it requires, as you mentioned, the name of the person speaking, the nature of their comments, but also a brief summary. And I think we may look back at these minutes and find that we did not include a brief summary for each member of the public who spoke. We can certainly do that and bring the minutes back to you for action on the consent calendar or just as an agenda item next month, depending on your preference. But I just wanted to point out those couple of items for clarification.
Excellent. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So do you want to, is there something further? Do you want to entertain that or a motion to defer the August minutes to the next meeting when these corrections that the executive director referenced could be reflected? Is that?
I think that would be good. Thank you.
All right, then I'm going to ask, is there a second for
Second.
Commissioner Smith? Second that motion to put agenda item 3 back on the calendar in October with the changes that Executive Director Pelham identified, and then we'll take a look at it then. So with that, can we have a roll call vote? Mr. Moderator, would you call the roll?
Yes, a motion has been made and seconded to postpone the draft meeting minutes to the October meeting, if that's correct. I will now call the roll. Commissioner Bush.
Oh, wait, actually, I just realized that we didn't ask for public comment.
Oh, okay.
So, caught myself just in time there. If we could please see if we have public comment on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. The Ethics Commission is now receiving public comment on consent calendar item number 3 remotely in this meeting. Each member of the public will have up to 3 minutes to provide public comment. You will hear a bell go off when you have 30 seconds remaining. If you joined the meeting earlier to listen to the proceedings, now is the time to get in line to speak. If you have not already, please press *3. It is important that you press *3 only once to enter the queue, as pressing it again will move you out of the public comment line and back into the listening mode. Once you are in the queue and standing by, the system will prompt you when it's your turn to speak, so it's important to call from a quiet location. Please address your comment to the commission as a whole and not to individual members. I'm currently checking for calls in the queue.
Thank you.
If you haven't already done so, please press *3 to be added to the queue. For those already on hold, please continue to wait until the system indicates you have been unmuted. If you have just joined this meeting, we're currently taking public comment on consent calendar item 3, draft minutes for the Ethics Commission August 14th, 2020 regular meeting. Be postponed. Please stand by. Madam Chair, there are no callers in the queue.
Thank you, moderator. With that, then, would you please proceed with the roll call vote on the motion?
A motion has been made and seconded. I will now call roll. Commissioner Bush,
Yes. Yes.
Commissioner Chu,
Yes.
Vice Chair Lee,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Chair Ambrose.
Yes.
With 5 votes in affirmative and 0 votes opposed to the motion, the motion is approved. And this part, you're going to have to help me out here. I do apologize.
The motion was approved to defer action on the August 2020 meeting minutes until the meeting of October. Thank you.
Well, with 5 votes in the affirmative and 0 votes opposed, the motion is carried. And with commissioners, I'm sorry, I don't understand this language. I'm sorry with this final vote.
It was by unanimous vote. So
Yeah, but
that's only if there was a, our script gives us more options than we need here.
yeah, exactly. Thank you. I do apologize for that.
No, not at all. Thank you, commissioners. I'm going to now call agenda item 4, which is the discussion and possible action on the revised draft Ethics Commission annual report for 2019-20. And before I ask our Executive Director Pelham to make the presentation, I just want to thank Commissioner Bush and Commissioner Chu for working with the Executive Director and her staff to improve the draft that we have before us. I think, in my opinion anyway, it looks pretty good. So Executive Director Pelham, if you want to walk us through the annual report and the changes.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Chair Ambrose. I'll echo the sentiment of appreciation for Commissioner Chu and Commissioner Bush for providing additional insights and feedback on the draft report following the Commission's discussion last month. I think the feedback last month, as well as the input by both commissioners in the following days, did help tighten, clarify the report. So I'm hopeful that with the information that's in front of you, you'll have a chance to consider whether this reflects the consensus and views of the Commission in terms of the kind of annual report that you want to see this year. We do know that with the work that we plan to do in the coming year, that the annual report next year and going forward will probably look different. There might be a bit more information fleshed out in ways that we haven't been able to with this report or in prior years. But I think this is a very helpful set of data and information to be able to share with the public about the work the Commission's been doing in this past year. There were only two key differences that I would highlight for you. One is at the outset of the report, and largely feedback from last month's discussion, we pulled forward into a by the numbers chart at the front of the report, a listing of some of the key data that the report contains. And so we wanted to just highlight and give a flavor for the kinds of information and the kinds of work that's being done on an ongoing basis at the Commission. So that's something that's inserted, I believe, right at the front of the report after the introductory letter or introductory page. And then lastly, the key change that we attempted to reflect in this revised draft was under the future initiatives section at the back of the report. Last month, you'll recall that the discussion with the Commission was very much focused on, well, where do we go from here? We didn't want to just leave the report hanging in terms of the critical ongoing dynamics that we were looking ahead to tackle in the coming year. So the last page, excuse me, the last section of the report ends with future initiatives. It's a bit more of an expanded section. to address specifically some of the challenges operationally that we'll continue to face as COVID-19 continues to be on our horizon and around us. Also, more direct discussion of the BLA recommendations, the Bureau of Legislative, the Budget and Legislative Analysts report that was issued last month. We also include the listing of recommendations that report contained now that they are out, so that it also provides some accountability for what we're hoping to accomplish in the coming year. And then lastly, a discussion about the ongoing corruption allegations in city government, that many of those developments and recommendations and processes will be continuing to unfold, and that we want to be very engaged in making sure that we can do what we can to prevent that kind of activity from taking root in city government going forward. So with that, I'm happy to just answer any questions or take any other feedback that you might have at this point. Thank you.
I'm not sure I'm clicking on the right buttons. I'm not, moderator, maybe you can help me. I can't seem to get, never mind, I just found out I needed to get the drop-down list so I could see if anyone raised their hand. So never mind, I'm technologically ready if anybody raises their hand. And that would be Commissioner Bush, if you have the floor.
Thank you. I'd just like to thank Executive Director Pelham for the work that went into this. It's, I would say it's a vast improvement over the last several years, only there were none for the last several years. So we went from 0 to 60. It looks very professional, and it covers a lot of the territory that needed to be covered. So I think it's a good snapshot. I think it's important in the future that we acknowledge to some extent that ethics has the lead role, but not the only role on some things. So that, for example, the controller is where whistleblower reports and complaints go, and ethics handles retaliation on whistleblower complaints. And that there's a requirement in the charter that says that when complaints come in to us, they have to be referred to the city attorney and the district attorney. So that the point of this is to make sure that the public knows that we're part of a process, but that we are not solely in charge. And this has been an issue in the past, and that's why I would think that it should be made clear in our overall description of the commission. So, for example, the commission voted several times to ask the mayor to remove a commissioner for conduct that was unbecoming. And the mayor never responded to the commission's request. But the commission had no authority to remove a commissioner. The person who makes the appointment has the authority to remove the commissioner. Well, that created a cirrus that lasted in the newspapers time after time about what was going on. And there was really no explanation from us. So to the extent that we can show what our authority is and where that authority then transfers to other agencies, it will make things smoother for the public and smoother for our staff, since it won't fall entirely on their shoulders. Thank you very much for what you've done. I think it's a great relaunch of the annual report.
Thank you. And Commissioner Chu, I'm going to recognize you. You wanted to speak?
Thank you, Chair Ambrose. I would like to say and also add, I think
I'm afraid you're freezing.
here,
Is it just me, or are you freezing for everyone?
Yeah, it looks like we
And we just lost
lost her. Yeah, we just lost you, Commissioner Chu, if you can still hear us.
commission.
can you hear me?
We
Oh,
can.
Oh, there you are.
Lots of technical issues. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you, moderator, can you hear me? Or is it
No, I can hear you also.
glitching for everybody?
We can hear you.
Ronald, you're muted. Okay.
Oh,
So, okay, great. I'll just carry on. that I think it's very important to use the vehicle of the annual report, but that only comes once a year. But I think that it's important to make sure that whether it's through tweets or through press releases or through other means like an op-ed in the newspapers, to make sure that the commission's position and that we stake out our ground and assert our authority in appropriate ways, consistent with the charter and consistent with professionalism, but be able to put our point of view out there because it's certainly in this time of unprecedented corruption allegations in city government, and to Commissioner Bush's point is that we have a role to play, not the only role, but a significant role, and that in the absence of us putting out and asserting what we are doing and telling what we're doing, I think that the vacuum is taken up by by other people's stories and narratives. And so I think that it would be important for us to keep that in mind as we head into the coming year, with things being so abnormal as they are, and with the work of the commission, I think, being so critical and needed more than ever.
Thank you. I agree. Is there any other comments from the commissioner? I had a few things I wanted to add, but I'll defer if anybody else. No. To your point, I think, up until tomorrow, I think the board acts on the budget. We've been waiting to see what sort of resources we can have available to us. And also we have today the policy prioritization plan, which will at least set a work agenda for one division of our staff, the policy division. And coming out of that, I agree with you. I think once we set a course for addressing whether it's the controller's report, the corruption allegations generally, the legislative initiatives that we may undertake at the Ethics Commission or may be considering that are coming out of the Board of Supervisors, that we should be forward looking in terms of, or doing outreach about what the commission is doing, both to alert people to the commission's mission, but also to garner feedback and support from the public and from the stakeholders around these really important issues. And to that end, one of the things that I was thinking about is that each one of us is appointed by an elected official, and an elected official in San Francisco is going to be in touch with constituents that may or may not be tuned into the Ethics Commission's website and actions. And, in the coming months, I would recommend that we all reach out to our appointing elected official just to inquire about what feedback they might have about what the Ethics Commission is doing or could be doing, and what they're hearing from constituents about those issues, because that's one avenue of communication that should be available to us, and I thought we could take advantage of. And then I know as once we get our agenda together, that Executive Director Pelham intends to ramp up again the interested person stakeholder group sessions. And so we can talk about, convening some of those communication opportunities and inviting at least, some commissioners to attend, provided that we don't turn them into public hearings. So those are my points. And with that, I'm going to ask for public comment.
Madam Chair, we are checking to see if there are callers in the queue. For those already on hold, please continue to wait until the system indicates you have been unmuted. If you have just joined this meeting, we are currently on the public discussion on the motion of agenda item number 4, discussion and possible action on revised. This is renamed. Agenda item number 4, discussion and possible action of revised draft Ethics Commission annual report for 2019-2020. If you have not already done so, please press *3 to be added to the public comment queue. You will have 3 minutes to provide your public comment, 6 minutes if you're online with an interpreter. You will hear a bell go off if you are off when you have 30 seconds remaining. Please stand by. We are checking for calls. Madam Chair, there are no calls in the queue.
All right. My notes say we're supposed to wait 90 seconds to confirm
Oh, I'm
if there are no
sorry.
callers. No, it's fine. That's after you tell me I'm supposed to wait 90 seconds.
Oh.
While we're waiting, I'm going to ask for a motion in a second to adopt the annual report for 2019-2020.
So moved.
And a second?
I'll second it.
Commissioner Bush seconds it. When we affirm that there are indeed no callers in the queue, then moderator, I'm going to ask you to call the roll, please. I hope you're keeping time. I'm not measuring 90 seconds, so.
I think you're good to go, Chair Ambrose. There are no.
All right, then if you want to call the roll on that motion in a second, adopt the annual report, please.
A motion has been made and seconded. I now call the roll. Commissioner Bush,
Yes.
Commissioner Chu,
Yes.
Vice Chair Lee,
Aye.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Chair Ambrose.
Yes, and with unanimous vote in support of the motion is adopted. And I want to thank everyone for their work on that. I'm going to now call agenda item 5, which is a discussion and possible action on the staff report on the budget for fiscal year 2021, and give the floor to Executive Director Pelham and Stephen Massey to make a presentation. Executive Director Pelham and Stephen Massey, I'm afraid you're both muted and not visible. There you are, Stephen.
I believe Director Pelham is going to speak to this item, but let's see if she's coming back on now. One moment.
No problem.
Commission Chair Chair Ambrose? I'm sorry, I lost connectivity.
It's all right. Go ahead. We'll wait for you.
Oh, I believe I'm back, and I may have just interrupted Stephen Massey, but as you may have heard, Stephen Massey is here, our acting Chief Operating Officer and Director of Technology, with me on the budget item. So apologies for that little bit of a glitch in our process today. Agenda item 5 shows an update on where we are at this point with the budget. We understand that the the full board will be considering the budget on the 15th, and they'll have a first reading on the 22nd, a second reading on the 29th, and then of course by October 1st, the new budget would need to be in place with the mayor's signature. So for all intents and purposes, the budget is, I think, as they would say, almost in the can. The report highlights for you on page 2 the items that were included. I am pleased to report that after we met last month and after having been at the Budget and Appropriations Committee meeting before the Board of Supervisors, we were informed by the Mayor's Budget Office that they have agreed to reduce our attrition savings rate for this fiscal year 21, so that we can, will have funding and to enable us to fill that vacant investigator position that we discussed at the Budget and Appropriations Committee. So that's good news. The other items that we had talked about in previous meetings, including the Ethics at Work program that we had proposed launching, is not going to be in the October 1st budget. That is something that I regret is not something that the city seems to have bandwidth for this at this point, but it does underscore for us, I think, the necessity to focus very closely over the next several months in anticipation of the FY22 budget development, that we focus on the development of a citywide integrity fund to the best extent possible, recognizing that some of the reason that we continue to be underfunded is because we have to go back every year and are struggling to try to be able to map out effective programs that we can develop, plan, and execute that take longer than 1 year to do. That includes technology projects. That includes even developing longer-term outreach and education efforts that are not one-off briefings of 10 minutes before city departments to remind them of key ethics provisions. There is a longer-term process we need to engage in with the city, and I think that takes longer-term funding, sustainability, and predictability as well. So our Stephen and I will be looking forward to reaching out to appropriate city offices over the next several months, because the budget development for FY22 is essentially around the corner. We would likely, assuming all prior schedules hold, which is maybe not a very good assumption this year, we would normally see budget instructions in December from the mayor's office. Obviously, the city is going to be very closely monitoring the economic situation in the city, additional costs, what kinds of reimbursements the city may be able to get with all of the emergency and the crises that are happening. But it's an unknown landscape to a great extent, as you all are aware. So we are mostly going to be focused on knowing where we stand October 1st, really aggressively working with a hiring plan to try to make as much progress as possible given the resources that we'll be provided with for this fiscal year. The investigator funding, the investigator position that we anticipate being able to fill as well. It was only funded, the attrition savings rate was only reduced for FY21 at this point. So we don't know what's going to happen in FY22, but we know that that will be something that we'll be coming back to as we develop the budget and continue to report to you on the progress that we're making on hiring and on the other work that we're doing this year. So with that, for what we are also focused on is how we now start doing and continue to implement the work that is underway for this fiscal year. And the report also just highlights some of the ways that we're operationalizing and prioritizing all the ongoing projects that we have. This report doesn't have that laundry list of them, but the staff and I have been meeting and putting together not only the priorities within each working group, but assessing how those need to be coordinated and planned across divisions, because we have a lot to do and there is a lot underway. So we highlighted here the sort of guiding principles and the focused areas of making sure that we're trying to maximize program impact at every step, that we're going to try and broaden understanding of the work that we do and the laws that apply to folks so that they can comply and understand the laws as much as possible with the technology resources and other abilities we have to reach out to folks, and also be very focused on our own service excellence, making sure that we're keeping an eye on those BLA recommendations. We're building in ways to track and report publicly on our work so that we too can provide a reason for the public to have confidence in the work that we're doing, not just other city departments, but that we're doing ourselves. So those are the three key things that we'll be providing a lens through which we're going to look at prioritizing the ongoing work that we have done. You also we talked Commission last month had questions about the possibility on the 4700 project about whether there might be a chance to do a subset project in this fiscal year. Knowing that we do now have some resources to get us putting that project back on track, the question was, is there a way we can make that work this year? And the answer from everything we have looked at and assessed and tried to take a critical hard look at is it's not possible to make it happen January 1st, 2021. There's just too much time and passage of resources that have been lost that would enable us to do that. We will, though, are now immediately starting to get it back on track. And expeditious right now means it will be up and running January 1st, launched January 1st, 2022, so that the filings for all city employees who are now filing on paper will be able to do it electronically. But a subset of that project is not feasible. So Stephen also can add any further detail if you have questions on that front. We tried to outline as much as possible in this memo what the considerations were that lead us to that conclusion. So with that, I'll stop and pause and see if you have any questions specifically for me, or if you want to hear from Stephen more about Form 700, or any other questions that you might have about the budget and its status and where we go from here. Thank you.
Okay. Stephen, did you want to go ahead and proceed, or you're inviting questions at this stage? Commissioner Chu, you had your hand up previously. I don't know if that was from the last item.
This is new to comment on this agenda item.
Okay, if you wanted to proceed then.
Thank you, Chair Ambrose. First, I wanted to extend my thanks to Executive Director Pelham and also to Stephen Massey for the hard work and the long slog that this has been for this budget. And it's dismaying to realize that next year's budget process is going to kick off in mere weeks. I'd also like to express my utter disappointment and dismay that the Board of Supervisors and the Mayor are not funding, providing funding or headcount to support ethics at work, the training initiative. I think I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I think that it's important and critical to have strong laws and regulations on the books, but in the absence of training so that people know what their obligations are, and the fostering of a culture of compliance and ethical behavior, that the laws and regulations are not nearly as effective as they could be. And that in light of the corruption scandal and the very significant and severe allegations of bad behavior that continue in multiple departments in the city, I think that it is appalling and unsupportable that the leadership in the city is saying, well, we're not going to address it. We're not going to fund any resources at the Ethics Commission to address this ongoing problem. And so I think it becomes even more critical than ever for the Ethics Commission to stake out its ground and communicate to the people of San Francisco what it is that we can do, what it is that we want to do, and that would fully support efforts to develop a proposal for the Citywide Integrity Fund, and would encourage and like to hear from staff when the proposal comes to us on different funding mechanisms. And one that we had talked previously was, instead of having to always have the Ethics Commission go to the general fund to ask hat in hand for resources to be able to fund the work, critical work that's needed, is for those departments that have had significant issues, in this case, DPW and Department of Building Inspection, where the arrests and the guilty pleas and the significant allegations of corruption have uncovered, is if they could devote a portion, a fraction of their budget to be able to support the ongoing work that is really critically needed. So that's from the broader picture. The more granular questions that I have are, and I don't know if you know the answer to this, Director Pelham. Do you know the amount that that was approved for the budget, that the incremental that the commission will be getting compared to how much we had asked for? So if the overall ask was $100 and we got, it's 50-50, they gave us 50, but they didn't give us 50. So I just want to have an understanding with the different positions that were approved and the half-year fundings that were effective. What does all of that add up to compared to what we had asked for?
Let me see if I might also ask Stephen. He looks like he may be looking directly at some of the charts that we had. I don't know if he has that at his fingertips. I'm sorry, I should have included that in this report, and that number is not here, but let me turn and see if Stephen has anything he can share.
Yeah, I don't have that figure in front of me. And it would take me a little bit to put that together. There have been multiple phases of this. So we had the original ask before the pandemic, and then there was the sort of redo that the mayor's office required that we go through. So anyway, it would take me a moment to come up with that.
Okay, thank you.
I might just as a quick summary, the items that were not included are on page 2, but with as a very rough estimate, I would say we're roughly flat. We did not get things we asked for, and there were some cuts in some of our operating budgets, our training budget, and so forth. And the attrition savings is always a bit of a wild card, but I would generally say that we are in a flat mode from our FY20 funding.
Okay.
At this point. And we will follow up to get you that specific information.
No, I no need to do extra work. I just wanted to get a sense of where we were kind of directionally in terms of the impact. And then my next question is in terms of hiring, if these positions are approved, and I think you may have answered this question previously, half-year funding effective January 1, does that mean that the commission can go forward with the hiring process and that the effective start date will not be until January 1, or does the commission have to wait until January to try and start to fill these positions?
No, it means we won't have funding to pay somebody to be in that seat until after January 1. But that means we do and will be starting the hiring process and reaching out to DHR and getting a hiring plan in place over the next several months so that we can try and get as many of those positions queued up, posted, interviewed for as much as we can. So I think in subsequent ED reports over the next several months, I'll work to keep you all informed about where we stand in that process and hopefully to demonstrate that we are making some progress towards that front.
And then is the increase that they approved for DHR support to help with that hiring process, will that be sufficient to get the expedition and urgency of action and help on their part that will be needed in order for us to move this hiring process along as quickly as possible?
I think the only honest answer I can give you is that I hope so, and that we will be doing everything we can to work with them. The DHR staff and the leadership has been very supportive and very aware of the hiring issues we faced. So, I'm hopeful that they'll be a strong partner in this. And again, all I can do is hope and plan and focus as much energy as we can to get this done, working with them. And I'll report back to you over the next several months as we make progress. And if we run into any impediments as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Ambrose.
Thank you. And I have a hand up from Commissioner Bush. If you wanted to take the floor, Commissioner, you're muted right now.
That's an excellent point. Thank you. I associate myself with Commissioner Chu's comments, and I would add a few points to that. In terms of departments that have created corruption issues for the city and darkened our reputation, it seems to me that one of the things that we can do is to call out those commissions. It's not just the individual wrongdoer, but every commission has what's called a statement of incompatible activities. And the kind of things that have been going on are certainly not compatible with the position of the city officials who have been arrested. And it seems to me that we are in a position to call out the commissions and the executive directors saying, you are not minding the store, you're not ensuring that there is compliance with the statements of incompatible activities. And we expect you to do that because nothing gets the attention of elected officials more than being called out for bad behavior. Certainly giving them a carrot does not work as well. So that is one thing. Second thing is, we mentioned before, but we have not yet approached how to do this, whether commissioners can be involved in fundraising for specific projects. So for example, seeking funds to support ethics at work efforts. We have some idea of what that would be involved. We know what the budget would be. We know what the project is. It has a time limited thing. It's the kind of element package that appeals to some fundraisers and to some corporate groups. So that's something I would like to get greater clarification as we look at our budget as to what extent commissioners can be helpful in soliciting and obtaining outside funding. Obviously, there are certain restrictions, and I'm sure that the deputy city attorney is going to give us good advice on where the line is so that we don't cross it. For example, I wouldn't suggest that we solicit contributions from lobbyists, but you understand the point that I'm making. And then there's another route that other departments, I noticed in particular the Department of Elections, they have advisory committees that are made up on specific topics. They have 3 advisory committees. If you go to their webpage, it has a very good description of how the advisory committees operate and what they do to add resources to the Department of Elections. I think that we could have advisory committees to assist us on, for example, how, if you look at the list of projects that we intend to do in the next 12 months, it's more than we can do in 12 months. And in fact, some of the things that we have, it says in the material we got, a project of this scope is overdue and warranted, particularly given the severity of the most recent allegations discussed. It's likely that this project will take at least 12 months from the initial research phase until final and full implementation. Well, if it's going to take 12 months just for the initial research, why can't we suggest that the initial research be done by an advisory group? I gave a presentation. I was asked to join with others to the incoming members of the civil grand jury. And they are very sharp people, as were some of the past civil grand jury members. And they are people who are well suited to ask to serve on an advisory committee that could do the research. That's what they're used to doing. They're used to researching how government works. They research comparatives to other places. In addition to civil grand jurors, there are people who are not working at full speed, like city librarians or teachers, all of whom have the same kind of skills that we're talking about. So I would like us to consider, as we look ahead, how to augment our resources through commissioner fundraising, advisory committees, and tapping into other departments. I mean, DHR and others have an entire budget for training of city employees. Why isn't it important to have them provide some of the training on Form 700s? For example, I mean, Form 700s are a classic example of doing the minimum that the law requires, which is a report once a year. But that's not disclosure. If somebody buys or sells a major property or changes their job or gets married, then you need to update the Form 700 to know what the conflicts of interest are. And that's allowed under the state law. But I've never seen anybody hand out advice to people who are filing 700s. Do not wait until April 1st to file. You should be filing when there's a major change in the conflicts that you face. Same thing goes with how are you going to file and disclose potential conflicts of positions that are unpaid on boards and voluntary groups. Our city law requires that those be disclosed if you are on a board that has other people on that voluntary board who have issues before the commission that you're on. And there's a whole citation, I can provide that to folks, but it's very clear. But where would you find that? In the Form 700, the disclosure for business positions is for paid business positions. It doesn't say that it could include unpaid positions. So we would need to know from Mr. Shin, to what extent do we have any leeway to either clarify that business positions can be unpaid as well as paid, or do we need to have a secondary document of fuller disclosure? Because if we're going to look at the question of how are we putting our resources together to meet the challenge of corralling corruption from taking over city agencies and city work, then we need to look at the larger pictures. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bush. Any other comments from the other commissioners before I make a comment? No, I don't see any hands. So I had a couple of questions, and forgive me if I should know the answer, but I'm going to start with the Citywide Integrity Fund. I see that capitalized as if it exists, but am I wrong in understanding that that is just a title that you've given to an idea that doesn't exist?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. So at least we have a name for it. So in terms of pursuing that, you know, we've had, because, you know, we don't want to be here again next July when the budget goes forward, talking about it as an idea if we're going to make any progress with that. I mean, I think there's a theme here, and that is that the Ethics Commission doesn't stand alone in addressing ethics in the city. Every department of the city has a responsibility, as Commissioner Bush was pointing out, to enforce their statement of incompatible activities, to do the training about, you know, code compliance and whether ethics or other regulatory issues. And again, we have a connection with at least 5 of the key elected officials and departments in the city, and I do think that in order for us to get, for example, DBI commission to support ethics getting a piece of their permit fees, or DPW getting allocation from their capital bond fund, we need to do the outreach within the to the city departments and garner support and flesh out exactly what that would look like. And I know, I guess in my mind too, we might want to start with outreach to the controller, because one of the things that I noted in listening to his budget presentation to the Board of Supervisors is that he highlighted the fact that the controller was able to successfully shift a number of their functions to a capital department funded operation as opposed to a general fund department, budget source for those activities. And anyone who's been around City Hall long enough knows that getting off the general fund and into a source of revenue that isn't constrained by Proposition 13 is how you get funding to move your initiatives forward. And so I think if that's our agenda, we need to take specific steps, forward on that. And that begins with conversations with the mayor's office, with the controller's office, with the board of supervisors, at least, say the chair of the budget committee, if not the one currently, then the one who's going to take the reins in January if there's a change, and put specific amounts and sources. So are we going to look at capital projects, because there's a lot of problems with contracting, and there's a lot of compliance issues around contracting now that we've changed the rules about disclosure. So that I see, of the city's $12 billion budget, a good chunk of that is the capital budget. And I know Commissioner Bush, you were on the Capital Fund Advisory Committee, so maybe that's something that you can help us with. But anyway, we can't do it now because the citywide integrity fund is not on the agenda, but I think that come, say, November, before we get the budget instructions, we might want to put that on the calendar and have everybody in the meantime come up with specific actionable steps that we can take to move that from idea to an actual presentation for the budget next July, and before July, because we would need legislation before anything could be appropriated in the budget in July. So I want to second that, that discussion. I'm still having trouble with the Form 700 filing, and I guess the trouble I'm having is just disappointment that where we were on a roll to get that in place by April of 2021, and here we are because of the delay, I guess, with the budget not getting approved till October. Just to confirm, you did get the position, right? You have the e-filing position that we need as of January. Is that correct?
Yes, we have the position effective January 1. So
Okay.
that position would be filled at the earliest January 1.
Okay. And then in reading your explanation, I guess, Stephen, too, it was really helpful for me to understand, because I was thinking about right now, I mean, there's some, I don't know, there were 26,000 city employees. I think we're up to 28,000 or something like that now. Each department has somebody assigned, if not a whole division of HR staff, plus a filing officer. That filing officer for Form 700 is going to be an important position this year, because as we'll see later, we have the biannual review of who has to file a Form 700. And so that department personnel is going to be in communication with both the executive leadership of that department, plus the staff that are going to be responsible for having to file. And so you're envisioning, this is a question, I'm just trying to make sure I understand, but you're envisioning that the Ethics Commission will have a few staff, one or two, who will liaison with all of the filing officers in those individual departments, who will know how to train and advise their portion of the 28,000 city employees who, I mean, it's 3,600 employees who have to file. So the 3,600 employees who have to file will liaison with the people that you're going to train within those departments to get them all online. You're not going to take over from those departments and have everybody come directly to the Ethics Commission. Is that, am I understanding that right?
Yes, and I'll turn this back to Stephen in just a minute, but the law currently remains that there are filing officers in departments, and we're the centralized filing official for the city. So this is, the complexity of this is it's not solely a technology issue. It's actually a technology project. It's also a business process project, right? So there are all these departments with their dispersed units that handle this and different approaches and different business approaches that they use to handling this. But let me turn it to Stephen and see if there's more he can guide us with on sort of the difference in the roles of the positions that would be assigned to help with this task, and maybe to flesh out a bit more what those tasks look like at a high level. If I can turn it over to Stephen.
Yeah, and that would be helpful. I mean, if with the patience of the commission, to my mind, going back to Commissioner Chu's comment on the culture of compliance, this Form 700 is our link to the 3,600 key decision makers within the city and county of San Francisco. That's why you have to file a Form 700, is because you've got your hands on permits and entitlements and major contract decisions. And if we can both improve, transparency with respect to the activities of those key players, in addition to the department heads and board and commission members who already file online, and we can build a relationship with those individuals, I think that we can do a lot more to address the culture of compliance, which, as Commissioner Chu pointed out, is as important as the black and white letter of the law on the page. And so I really do want to understand how we're going to engage, through that process in this coming year and try and make the most of it, even if we can't get everybody, on NetFile by April. So
I think, Chair, that's exactly what our goal is, and that's exactly why the launch date is January 1, 2022, with where we are at this point, because we know that to make that effective, those processes and those relationships effective, and the ultimate disclosure system effective, it takes that time to work that in so that it is integral to the work that's being done. Unlike parachuting something in, a technology system, or just parachuting some regulation into a department, it won't take hold. And the risk is that then it fails. And so what we're really trying to do is exactly supporting what I think the commission has been trying, through what you're saying, we're trying to accomplish that precisely through this approach. But let me just stop and turn it to Stephen, because I think he might be able to shed some further light on this.
Yeah, what Director Pelham described is accurate, that unlike our other e-filing systems that we've spun up, where we are the complete administrator of the system, and we have filers who are filing directly with the Ethics Commission. In this case, we're going to act as sort of like a citywide administrator, and then each department is going to administer their own department's filers using our software. So we are like providing the online system, but they are going to be doing the lift of adding their filers, managing their filers, and managing the ones that leave the department. And part of the reason for that is we don't have any insight into the HR movement that's going on in each department. And to automate something like that is something that we looked into very early on in this project. And after speaking with the Controller's Office and DHR through a number of meetings, it really seemed like the city was a number of years away from being able to integrate something like the NetFile system with an HR system so that could all be automated. But right now, it's going to be very dependent on each department having the filing officer in coordination with their HR managing which employees are coming in and which employees are coming out. So hopefully that gives you a sense of how this system is going to work. We always envisioned with this project that we are going to maintain a relatively small staff to not only execute the project, but to maintain it as a support for these filing officers. But we were never envisioning that we were going to take on acting as the filing officer for all 3,600 filers. We would need a much bigger staff.
Right. So I understand that, and I hear that, and I think that actually makes sense. I guess because I know we have many other items on the agenda, we can move on. What I do want to ask is that as part of the executive director report as we go on, through the year, in addition to letting us know when and if you get your e-filing administrative support person on board. If you can both keep us apprised of your steps to, liaison with these filing officers. I mean, I actually think that with the biannual review that's going on, which you'll have a connection, in regards to, in addition to specifically, at least in the face of the annual filing in April, an opportunity to, engage with those filing officers and their staff and do outreach and education, heads up, next year, you're going to be doing this electronically, et cetera. So if you could just, keep it front and center on the agenda and in your report so that we know that we're making progress and making the best use of those issues, being on everybody's, front top 10 agenda for this coming year. And then the other thing with respect to the budget, so you were saying the board's going to act on the 15th, and then first reading is on the 22nd, and final adoption on the 29th. So does that mean the hearing on the 15th is a committee and is actually subject to further action changes by the board? Is that maybe, Andrew, I don't know if you know where the budget's at, but if they're not doing first reading until the 22nd, I assume that the 15th is still open to the board doing ad backs, et cetera. Anyway, I'd just be curious if anyone, hears of anything, make sure you let Executive Director Pelham know that she can still put the touch on somebody for additional funding that we could theorize would be forthcoming. And I guess going back to Commissioner Bush's comments, on the statement of incompatible activities, that's another item I'd like to take up at the next or subsequent meeting, is how the Ethics Commission, interfaces with departments on, for example, under the statement of incompatible activities, individuals within a department can get a special authorization from their appointing officer to engage in, unpaid board or other, engagement with other organizations, by way of example. I'm just curious about where that information is available, so we can follow up on some of the points that Commissioner Bush was making. And then so too on the question about fundraising and whether or not what the rules are with respect to commissioners engaging in, I guess what we would call seeking behested payments, behested to the Ethics Commission. Deputy City Attorney Shen, if the next meeting, if you can speak to that. I don't want to put you on the spot to answer that right now, but if we can come back to that again.
I can quickly answer that question if you want, Chair Ambrose.
With the patience of the rest of the commissioners, if you wouldn't mind, I'd like.
Yeah, or at least I can hit the highlights, and if there's further questions, we can certainly take it up in another meeting.
Okay, thank you.
So I think in general, there's a few rules to keep in mind in terms of soliciting donations or seeking donations to a city department to assist with the department's own operations. The first is that any donations that a department receives that is worth more than $10,000 will require board authorization and approval. So the board plays a process in this as well. Second rule to keep in mind is that donations to departments must be reported by the department on its website. Some very basic information about who the donor is, how much has been donated, and whether the donor has any financial interest with that department receiving the funds. The third rule to keep in mind is something that's a little bit more in our wheelhouse, and that is commissioners, as you know, are subject to behested payment reporting. So if commissioners are soliciting donations from people with certain kinds of business or matters before their own body, they have to file behested payment reports with the Ethics Commission itself. So those are three sort of basic legal rules to keep in mind. But if the commission does want to go in this direction, I would also strongly recommend that the commission have a fuller discussion of who would be designated to do this at the commission's behalf. You know, who is representing the commission making these solicitations or asks. And likewise, I would strongly encourage the commission to have an open discussion about who is it appropriate to solicit donations from. Is it from any person on the street? Is it from persons that potentially are in the regulated community? Should we only go to nonprofit foundations because perhaps they're a little bit more neutral? I think those kinds of things should be fleshed out and encourage you to have those policy discussions as well. So those are just the highlights. I don't want to hold you up from the rest of the agenda. Thank you.
No, that's helpful. Again, you know, first steps from idea to action. We need to know how, you know, the rules that we'll operate under. So we'll certainly come back to that because we're obviously not going to get the money that we need to do the work that has to be done, although good work on getting the money that you did get. So with that, I want to ask for public comment if there aren't Commissioner Lee, I just saw your hand. If you could go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would propose that we put this on the next meeting's agenda item with a specific report on how the departments report on these donations. Pardon my ignorance, but this is the first time I learned that departments are required to put on the website of any donations. And I don't think many people knew about this. So I think it would be good for us to have a fuller discussion at the October meeting.
Okay. And Commissioner Bush, I see your hand up.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions. In terms of the complexity of organizing this with various city departments, how does this work in other jurisdictions? Because the requirement to migrate Form 700s into electronic formats is a state requirement. So how is it happening in places like Los Angeles? Are they taking a year and a half to make the migration there?
Can you clarify that? You're saying there's state law that says that everybody has to file electronically?
Yes. That's how all of this developed, was it came from a state directive from the FPPC.
Did not know that.
I sorry for jumping in here. I'm not sure if that's true. The vast majority of Form 700s filed by city employees are on paper. And as far as I know, that is not improper under any state law.
I will get you the reference to.
Happy to take a look at it.
So they're, I mean, in regard, so it may be that they're encouraging, you know, a move to electronic filing, but in any event, the point that I think Commissioner Lee, because we didn't clearly give her a chance to say her whole piece, but I do agree that, and we can maybe actually have a specific motion under new business agenda item, but I will entertain a motion to put this whole question about seeking outside sources of funds on the agenda for October when we pick up that item at the end of the calendar today, if that's okay, instead of doing it right now. And then I want to make sure, Commissioner Bush, is your hand still up or just from before? All right, then I would like to ask.
I was only complete the thought about outside funding is one of the reasons why the civil grand jury has had an influx of highly skilled members, is that the corporate community in San Francisco has sent out word to its senior staff that it wants them to make more of a contribution to the city. And so it's giving them time off up to a year to sit on things like civil grand juries. That's only one place to go. So if we have a discussion about who can we seek money from, we need to have some idea of what is the universe that we would be looking at. Thank you.
No, thank you. So I'm going to call for public comment and then ask for, there is a possibility of a motion on action on the budget items. I haven't heard anything specific that we need to do, but if you, actually, I'm going to ask now before we ask for public comment, is there any specific motion that anyone wants to make, or are we satisfied with the general discussion and direction that we've provided to the executive director? Commissioner Lee, sorry. You have your hand up?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to add my comments regarding the electronic filing requirement. I would ask the Assistant City Attorney, in addition to making another report, a fuller report next week, to look at the potential discriminatory angle if we were to require everything done electronically, because there is a certain segment of our community who do not have access to the internet, and also they may have certain impairment that would preclude them from using electronic equipment. So I think that even if this were a requirement, I would like the Assistant Attorney to look at the potential discriminatory aspect of requiring everything done electronically.
Right. Just to clarify, though, the only people that are required to do this are the 3,600 senior staff people in city government. And so they would be entitled to both accommodations if their disability was an issue, and they'd certainly be entitled to access to a city computer for purposes of accessing NetFile. So I think that those issues could be addressed. The other point, though, I mean, feel free to comment on that, Andrew, if when we put this on again for discussion in October, but the other, I'm sorry, Commissioner Lee, I lost track of the other point that you were making about the Form 700, so I apologize. Actually, what I am going to do is go and ask Ronald if you can go ahead and call for public.
Okay.
Somebody's not muted.
Madam Chair, we are checking to see if there are callers in the queue. For those already on hold, please continue to wait until the system indicates you have been unmuted. If you have just joined this meeting, we are currently on public discussion on the motion of agenda item number 5, discussion and possible action on staff report on budget for fiscal year 2021. If you have not already done so, please press *3 to be added to the public comment queue. You will have 3 minutes to provide your public comment, 6 minutes if you are online with an interpreter. You will hear a bell go off when you have 30 seconds remaining. Madam Chair, we have a caller in the queue.
Thank you.
Hello, caller. Your 3 minutes begins now.
So, Commissioners, my name is Francisca da Costa, and I find this entire deliberation very, very, very boring. We have a budget of over $12.8 billion. We have a sunshine task force that is not working. Our ethics commission dysfunctional. How can any organization, how can any entity function without having a good, working, able staff. Why are we talking in circles? Right now, the corruption in this city has reached saturation point, and the Ethics Commission has to be reformed on a war footing. Don't be talking in circles. You do have one or two people who are capable of making the reform. We are fed up with the Sunshine Task Force. They are fed up with the Ethics Commission. They are fed up with the controller. They are fed up with the city attorney. Y'all give too much importance to the city attorney. If you look at an SFPUC debacle, the city attorney is in the middle of that. Whistleblowers have gone to the controller's office with empirical data. What do you think the controller's office has done? Given the information to the city attorney who has sat on it. What do you think the Ethics Commission does? Do you want somebody like Dr. Derek Kerr to do a needs assessment on the Ethics Commission for free? It's there. Go to the newspaper, the Observer, the West Side Observer. If you read the latest West Side Observer, you have an assessment, a needs assessment on the Ethics Commission, which is a failure. I repeat, a failure. Do not talk too much. We want action. The Board of Supervisors, they are culpable. What else do you want to hear from the constituents? The constituents are fed up. Nobody wants to listen to the Ethics Commission. It's boring.
Your 3 minutes are up, caller.
Thank you, Mr. DaCosta. With that, then, I'm going to ask, is there a specific motion on agenda item 5, or if we're content with the general direction that we've given the executive director and our plan to revisit items, then I'm going to move on and call agenda item 6. So do I see any hands? No, then. Thank you very much, both Executive Director and Stephen, for the information and work that you've done on the budget. I know it's been a very challenging year. And with that, I'm actually going to call for a 10-minute break, if that's okay. It's 11 o'clock right now before we take up agenda item 6, because I think that's going to be a fairly lengthy and substantive conversation. So with that, if we can all be back on screen in 10 minutes. Does that work for everyone?
Yes.
All right, very good.
SF Gov TV, San Francisco Government Television.
And with that, I'm going to call agenda item number 6, discussion and possible action on the monthly staff, well, it says monthly, on the staff policy report, including the policy prioritization plan. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Pat Ford to make the presentation, please.
Thank you, Chair Ambrose. This is Pat Ford, Senior Policy and Legislative Affairs Counsel. In the interest of time, I will just cut right to the policy prioritization plan. There aren't any major updates to give you that haven't already been covered as part of the budget discussion or will be covered later as part of Executive Director Pelham's report. So I just will skip that right now. So the policy prioritization plan, as you know, is a planning tool that the Commission has used to help structure its policy work. And when I say policy work, typically that means legislative projects. So specifically projects that will likely result in an ordinance or regulations being approved by the Commission. And then in tandem with that kind of legislation, there are always quite a few administrative aspects as well. So it could be the creation of new forms, new processes, new compliance materials, new training modules. There's a lot of work that goes alongside those legislative aspects on the back end. So that's what this tool means. It's not comprehensive of all policies that the Commission may pursue, like a policy to seek outside funding, for example. That wouldn't be a policy project that's on this plan, even if it is a policy of the Commission's. I know the term is kind of susceptible to multiple meanings, so I just want to clarify that that's how that term has been understood for purposes of this planning tool, is legislative projects. So with that in mind, the two projects that I'm proposing as part of this policy prioritization plan are first and foremost a project to review certain conflict of interest rules that are part of Article 3, Chapter 2 of the Campaign and Governmental Conduct Code. That's where the bulk of the city's conflict of interest rules are contained. So those are rules that pertain to gifts and recusal and other rules that try to address instances where city officials or employees are conflicted, where they have personal interests that could interfere with their public duties. The reason that I think a project like this is so important is because of the corruption investigations that you've already discussed earlier in today's meeting. I think anytime allegations like this are made and such major investigations happen, it's important for the Commission to look at its laws that it administers, look at the outcomes that we've seen, the programs that we've created to support those laws, and make sure that we're doing enough, make sure that there is no room for improvement, and usually there is. Usually there are areas that we find where we can strengthen the rules, areas where we can improve our programs, improve our compliance materials as far as we're able to, improve our training. So anyhow, that's what I envision for this project, is essentially to try to understand everything that has been made public thus far about the various investigations. And those are investigations by the FBI, the City Attorney's Office, and the Controller's Office. And you've already heard from the Controller's Office about their first report regarding DPW contracting. They have additional reports coming out. So a big part of this project will be really staying on top of those investigations and understanding what we're learning as those continue to come out, because it seems like it'll be a situation where more information is continuing to come out over, it looks like several months at least. We'll learn more and more as this unfolds. So the project is designed to be flexible and allow us to react to that information as we learn it. So generally speaking, these kind of legislative projects take around a year to complete. And when I say to complete, I'm talking about both the legislative aspect and the administrative aspect. These projects are not just about getting laws on the books. As Commissioner Chu put it very well earlier, that it's not just about getting laws on the books, but it's also about how we administer them. And it's important that when we're looking at projects like these, we're also factoring in that kind of back-end work that is necessary to really make the laws practicable and enforceable, that once they're on the books, that then I'm working with the engagement and compliance team, the audit team, and sometimes the enforcement team as well, to make sure that we're all on the same page about what those laws mean, and we're creating materials that are helpful to people to comply with the rules, and creating new forms as needed. So there's a lot of work there. I would say, judging from past projects, a year is on average about how long it takes. Typically, there's been a 2 to 3 month period of research that starts out the project. And during that period, we also start to engage with stakeholders. So usually for legislative projects, we've done at least one, usually 2 rounds of stakeholder meetings. We call them interested persons meetings. And usually those happen in pairs. So we'll do one afternoon meeting and one evening meeting. So we try to accommodate people's schedules. And we take that information, internalize that, and try to, be responsive to it. And then we bring proposals to the commission, oftentimes in concept form initially, not with actual drafted language that seemed to be more effective in the past. And usually the commission has taken about 3 public meetings to arrive at an ordinance that it will approve. And I think that's just what the commission has been comfortable with in the past. That's how long it's taken to listen to all of the comments that stakeholders bring to those meetings, pose questions to staff, make requests for further information, for further amendments to the ordinances, and ultimately arrive at an ordinance where there's consensus around the ordinance. So that process there, that's just the Ethics Commission side of the process, is usually taken about 6 months. So that's research, stakeholder meetings, further drafting after we hear from stakeholders, and then bringing concepts and then draft legislation to the commission, having multiple commission meetings, multiple iterations of the legislation, and then ultimately approval of an ordinance. So about 6 months. And then it goes to the board. And as you know, the legislative process at the board takes some time too and can be hard to predict. I think right now there are a lot of competing priorities out there. Obviously, it's a very complicated budget season. The board also takes legislative recesses. COVID is
Pat, I actually think, we do know how long. I don't think anybody disputes that it's going to take 12 months to move the legislation through, but you had some very specific ideas about what we would be substantively that we would be looking at. And so I wondered if you could jump to that and get them, sort of enunciated so that people who are listening know substantively what we're talking about with respect to the policy prioritization plan proposal item number 1, this addressing, the conflict of interest and regulatory review. I'm just looking at your bulleted items and in the memo for this item.
Yeah, so as I alluded to, the scope that I envisioned for this project would be roughly tied to the allegations that have come out of, so far, the FBI's criminal complaints against a number of city officials and contractors. We could see more complaints from the FBI and possibly more information being revealed as the city attorney and controller come out. So this list could expand, but right now I tried to make this list to identify areas that we've seen so far in these allegations. So typically the conduct that's been alleged has involved gifts. That's kind of been at the core of what we've seen of city officials receiving gifts and perhaps giving preferential treatment after receiving the gifts, and in some cases, allegations of laundering gifts to try to conceal their source. So this list looks at a number of aspects of gifts. So there are exceptions to gift rules. I think we would want to closely look at those exceptions and see, do they still look appropriate in light of what we're learning right now? Gifts of travel is kind of a carve out from most gift rules. It's kind of a parallel line of regulation, so we would look at that as well. There's a restriction on gifts from certain sources, which are called restricted sources. These are typically people who are trying to influence the employee or official or that department. And again, there are exceptions to that gift rule. So I think we would want to closely look at those exceptions and see if they need to be changed. Aside from gifts or specific gift rules or exceptions, I think we want to look at the overall complexity of gift rules. All you have to do is look at the City Attorney's Good Government Guide, which is an incredibly useful and comprehensive compliance tool to understand how complicated these rules are. And I think complexity of rules can sometimes undermine their effectiveness. So I think we might try to identify ways that we might make the overall body of law here more straightforward. That may come from consolidating definitions, eliminating or simplifying exceptions, trying to bring multiple types of rules under one umbrella of rules. I think there's a number of ways we could do that. But this is really geared towards making compliance easier. Obviously, we've prioritized trying to do more training. We've had mixed results with getting resources to do that. But another tool in our toolbox here is to try to make the rules easier to understand and follow. Likewise, I think it would be good to look at the statements of incompatible activities. These exist separate from the actual conflict of interest code. However, I think a lot of the rules that are common in the statements of incompatible activities probably could exist in the code itself so that they would be applicable to everyone rather than just the officials that adhere to that particular SIA. And also they would carry a little bit more serious penalty as well. So that's something I want to look at. And then lastly, post-employment restrictions. This is trying to address the revolving door between the private sector and city government. I think we want to look at that and just see if there's anything that needs a close examination in light of the allegations that we've seen. And this list of bullet points is really just kind of a starting point. I would be really interested in hearing what stakeholders think we should be focused on, and that's always a big part of these projects, is doing scoping with stakeholders and hearing their ideas. So this is not meant to be a hard and fast list. These are just kind of ideas of where we could start. I don't know if you had any more questions about that.
No, and I actually think, I mean, before we take up item B, the biennial review, which is the other proposed policy project that you would prioritize, I think maybe we should take questions and discussion on this first item since it is fairly substantive. Is that okay with you, Mr. Ford?
That would be fine.
Go that way? All right, then I see Commissioner Chu's hand up. So if you wanted to comment, Commissioner Chu, or ask a question.
Yes, thank you, Chair Ambrose. I have actually a couple of questions. I am in full support of this policy initiative. I think that I agree that it's overdue and sorely needed. My two questions are this. One is, can an ordinance or a ballot initiative, is it possible to include a funding requirement in the ordinance itself? That's my first question. In order to ensure that we will have the resources to be able to successfully implement the ordinance. And then my second question is, could we, and I would love for, as the work is undertaken and as you as you do some benchmarking and other research, is explore, can we make ethics training mandatory? Much as we have to take sunshine training every year, as well as the anti-harassment training, could we explore requiring or incorporating in what would be the process by which to make this mandatory, that a certain segment of the city workforce must take ethics training, because we are always going to be scrambling for resources and mind share and time on people's agendas for them to participate in in-person trainings. But is there a way, and could we explore what it would look like if we could, one, could we make ethics training mandatory, and two, what have other jurisdictions done, as examples that we could follow, or some things that we could learn from. And if we could have a point of view and a recommendation, I think as we come out of the work, I think would be very helpful.
I'll answer those in reverse order. So to the ethics training first, there is an ethics training currently that is mandatory for some, but it's not mandatory for 100% of city employees. I can't articulate right now how the group for which it's mandatory is defined, but it's a relatively narrow subset of all of the people who work in and around city government. So I think one thing we could consider is expanding that list of who has to take the training.
Is that a one-time training, or when I say mandatory training, I'm thinking a mandatory annual training, so that it is always going to be refreshed?
I believe it is annual.
Okay.
Already, yeah, and the deadline coincides with the deadline for the Form 700. So April 1st is when Form 700 filers have to do their annual filing, and then likewise, people who are required to do the ethics and sunshine training also have to certify by that date that it's done. But yeah, we could absolutely look at expanding the list of who's required to do the ethics training. But I think the training is good. It's of great value, but I think, of course, our preference would be to change how the training is done as well. But as you heard from Executive Director Pelham, we're limited in what we can do there. So maybe for right now, it's having more people take the online training. I should clarify that it is an online module. And then we work towards the goal of having that morph into a more hands-on, in-person training. When I say in-person, probably Zoom for the foreseeable future, but we actually have a trainer working with a smaller group of people. So there is that live component, but that's just not something that we're able to deliver on right now. So I think, we could have a recommendation for now and then a recommendation for later as part of this project. So I will definitely include that in this, assuming that the commission wants to move forward. To your first question about funding and ballot measures, I do believe that that's possible, but I'll defer to Deputy City Attorney Shen to tell you more specifics on that.
So, Commissioner Chu, it is possible for an ordinance or a ballot measure to provide for some funding, but usually only for a limited amount of time. So the budget itself is just an ordinance. It's an ordinance that could be amended like any other ordinance. So if there's a ballot measure ordinance, it could provide for some short-term funding. And we've done that in the past with some Ethics Commission-related ballot measures, but it doesn't guarantee that funding sort of on an ongoing basis. Essentially, it can provide some short-term funding, maybe in the initial year, but when the next budget cycle rolls around, that budget that's enacted after that cycle, that essentially governs. So that's generally how that works with ethics ordinances, including the ordinances that we've directly put on the ballot. Okay. In terms of the training, if you don't mind me just briefly following up what Matt added, or just mentioned a couple minutes ago. So there's basically 3 buckets of people who need to do mandatory annual ethics training. They're elected officials, commissioners, and department heads need to do the mandatory annual ethics training that you all do as well. The reason that was decided way back when that those are also the same 3 groups of people who directly file the Form 700s with the Ethics Commission. It was decided that the same population that filed with the Ethics Commission directly should also be subject to these enhanced ethics training requirements. In addition to those 3 categories that I mentioned, I believe, although I actually don't know all the full contours of this, that DHR is separately required staff in departments with some purchasing authority to also take a very similar and maybe the actual identical interactive ethics training that you all do as well. But that I actually don't know all the details about, and that's been sort of more of a DHR-led effort. We could expand mandatory ethics training to a broader segment of city officials and employees. But one thing to keep in mind is that if we do impose more training requirements, and if it's possible that someone who fails certificate training be subject to discipline or some other adverse consequences, we would need to engage and meet and confer about that as well, because that would be a new obligation they would take on, and so we would have to meet and confer with the relevant union.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. Commissioner Chu, did you have any further questions at this time?
No, that's all I had for this. Thank you.
Okay, then Commissioner Bush, I'm gonna go ahead and recognize you. You need to unmute your microphone.
Thank you. Obviously, the amount of work that's contemplated, even in just this one piece of it, is looked at least a 12-month period of time. It's clear that the commission does not have the resources that it needs to move as quickly as we need to move. I don't think that the public is going to be patient with us to say that we'll have something ready by 2022, especially if in the middle of all this, we're seeing prosecutions and court cases going on involving senior city officials. So I again renew the issue that I've raised before of creating advisory groups that can assist in doing, I think in Mr. Ford's presentation, the first 3 or 4 months was going to be spent on researching our law and comparing that to other things. Those are things that can be done by an advisory group. There's a whole lot of issues that fall within that. The issue of incompatible activities is one. Also, the Campaign and Government Code Section 3.214 and Ethics Regulation 3.214-5 requires disclosure of, quote, a professional relationship based on regular contact in a professional capacity, including regular contact in conducting volunteer and charitable activities. Well, that's serving on the board of a nonprofit that's involved in charitable activities. And that's exactly the kind of loophole that was used by Mohammed Naru. Not to mention the failure to fully comply with all the disclosures because we don't enumerate the disclosures. So Mohammed Naru's Form 700 did not disclose his relationship on the Transbay terminal, whatever it's called, or that he was the one that was the key staff for rate setting on garbage. All of which were involved people who later are identified in the criminal proceedings that are currently underway. So I don't see how any of that, for example, this government code that I decided, I don't see where that shows up. I don't see any place where that's disclosed for the public. If there is, please tell me where it is. I don't see it. It's not in a Form 700. It's not on the webpage of the departments. It's not on ethics. So what's the point? As Commissioner Lee said earlier, what's the point of writing these laws if we're not going to enforce them? If they don't have some way of showing up so the public can see that what we're doing. We're just talking to ourselves, whistling past the graveyard. So I think that to undertake what Mr. Ford is suggesting, we have to set up benchmarks of timelines or deliverables out of all of it. It can't just be a wish list of this is what we'd like to see done in the next 12 months. It has to be, this is what we're going to do in the next 60 days. And these are going to be the deliverables out of it. So some kind of document like that has to be created. Until I can see a document like that, I'm not inclined to support moving forward with this at this time.
Are there other comments from the commissioners before I make some comments? Just to be clear, in my understanding, the 12 months reflects sort of the brackets, beginning to end. It's not, we're not saying that we're going to wait till 2022 to have a proposed legislative initiative addressing the specific indictments and corruption charges. I think what we're looking at, and that's why I wanted to substantively get to the items that Mr. Ford identified just off the top of his head, as it were, knowing what he knows about the indictments and knowing what he knows about the code. He's identified 10 targets for focus on what we would try to fix. And I'm assuming that too, because I have listened to a couple of the board hearings. We have several supervisors who are moving forward on their own initiative or, with the constituents that they're working with to introduce legislation to address some of the conflict of interest rule issues. I'll be honest with you, I read the indictments. I don't think this was a confusion problem. I don't think that we didn't have a little, even the point that you made about Direct Department Head Nuru and his role on the Trans-Bay Joint Powers Board. As a member of the Trans-Bay Joint Powers Board, he probably had to file a Form 700 with the state because that's a state entity. The fact that he didn't identify that on his city Form 700 isn't why he got away with for so long, whatever the bid rigging corruption that he was engaged in with respect to Trans-Bay. So there's part of me that thinks, yes, we should make our laws more clear, simple, transparent, and effective. At the same time, the corruption problem is not because people were confused that they couldn't take a $2,000 bottle of wine from some developer and not report it. That isn't what happened. It's not that they could call the city attorney. It's not like they even read it and said, it's kind of gray. Maybe it's okay for me to do this. I really don't think that that's the problem. Nevertheless, I do think that we will make an effort to clarify anything that just for no other reason to make sure that the public understands that what the rules are and why they're important. What I'd like to see, and I guess this is really what you were talking about, Commissioner Bush, is not 12 months from beginning to end. I mean, I understand that that's the brackets. What I want to understand, because this policy prioritization plan could also be called Pat Ford's inbox, because you're the one guy who actually has to do all this work. And it's always been a constraint in terms of allocating, is this effort going to take up 75% of your time for the next 3 months when we're going to come back and revisit the prioritization? Or is it going to take up 10% of your time? And that, in some respects, I know you don't fully know the answer to that because it really depends on, if the board moves ahead and introduces legislation at the beginning of October, then we're going to have to react to that as well as move forward with the outline of the work that you described. So I'm going to ask you just to comment on how much of your time and keeping in mind that you're also recommending that we move forward with the biennial review on the Form 700 filers, which I consider, again, to be where we will make the most progress. If we can get to those 3,600 filers and support them in the culture of compliance, I think we'll go a long way towards nipping potential corruption in the bud in this city. But anyway, so Pat, how much of your time do you think between now and really just in the next 3 months? Because my understanding is every quarter we're going to review this prioritization and kind of reevaluate what we need to move forward with. So anyway, go ahead.
I mean, the answer is quite a bit. I think this is a pretty comprehensive project. These legislative projects are always very intensive. Once we really get them ramped up and we have a number of stakeholders engaged, we have commissioners engaged, we have members of the board and their staff and their constituents engaged. It can be all encompassing. I mean, it can be the kind of thing where it occupies my calendar for weeks and weeks on end. It's hard to say. This is just a strange moment. Politically and in general, it's hard to know what level of attention folks are going to contribute to this. I mean, look back at the ACAO, massive level of stakeholder engagement, and likewise with the public financing project, we had some really dedicated stakeholders that made the project really vibrant and really hearty. That could happen again here, or possibly not. I mean, this could be a situation where it's a presidential election year. Obviously, there's a public health crisis, environmental crisis going on, and people don't engage, which, you know, that's not a good thing, but it would mean that the project would move faster. So I'm not saying that's what we want, but yeah, and to the notion of the board doing legislation, I mean, we can make the most detailed plan we want, but the Ethics Commission does not have the authority to amend the code on its own. We have to work with the board. That means we have to work on their timetable, basically. You can approve an ordinance, but ultimately they're the ones that have to approve it, along with the mayor. And if they don't like it and they amend it, then it comes back to the commission. So I try as much as I can to work with them on the front end so that the ordinance the commission ultimately approves already has approval of a majority of the board, or at least appears to or would attain that approval so that we can avoid that back and forth. But I mean, there's no way to do that. I mean, we have the Brown Act, and these discussions have to occur in public meetings. So, you know, we don't know. I can't always give a prediction. So,
okay, that's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure we got that out there for everybody to keep in mind. I see Executive Director Pelham's hand up, and so I want to recognize her before I go back to Commissioner Bush and Chu.
Thanks. I just had a quick add-on to the discussion about, you know, the Pat Ford Show and what Pat Ford Show looks like in practical terms. When we are doing policy reviews and policy analysis to get to legislative developments, there's the key point that he mentioned early on, which is the administrative review piece of any research. It is not Pat sitting at his computer doing research in theory based on white papers that other organizations have issued, right? It is about also understanding how the implementation of the current laws that are on the books have worked and how they have not worked. That engages people in addition to policy. It's our engagement and compliance staff. It's understanding from our enforcement team, where have we not been able to enforce the law because there have been problems with the law. It's also understanding the current reports that continue to come out from the Comptroller's Office about and elsewhere about what we're seeing with the current corruption investigations. So all of that is a very it is a broad plate of work that is focused on sort of real world implications of the laws as we know it. So I say that because I think it's important, and Commissioner Bush, you mentioned earlier, you may be not inclined to support moving forward at this point until you see maybe some of the deliverables and timetables more spelled out clearly. And that's something that we know BLA report across the office we will be doing. I would just ask that if that's a concern that that you look to us to develop those, but that it is important to start this work now. That we need, because of all of that collaboration and coordination effort, to make this a real project, comprehensively reviewing what we know. That I would look for the Commission's willingness and comfort to identify if this is the priority area that you are interested in us proceeding with. that we know that now because we need to put things in place now and nail down what our plans are going forward if we're going to achieve any of it. The other thing I'll just add lastly is that, as you know, with a hiring plan, there is an 1822 policy analyst position. We have funding to hire effective January 1st. Pat Ford will also be involved in the hiring process for that. So there will be a multiple of things going on, as I know you appreciate, but I just wanted to put that in context as well for you as you consider what action you might want to take today. Thank you.
Before I recognize Commissioner Chu and Commissioner Bush, can I just ask you, because I had that factual question in mind. I didn't see in the list. So there's an 1824 policy position. Is that what you said just now?
1822, a policy analyst. Yeah.
Policy.
So it's the junior of the two positions in the
Right.
policy shop. Yeah, the position that would be Brian Cox was the person who was the most recent incumbent last year ago. But 1822 policy analyst position.
Okay, that you will be advertising and attempting to hire.
Yes.
Hopefully early in the new year.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
And then one more point of clarification I want to make, and then I'm going to recognize you, I swear. And that is that on this question about do we vote or defer, I just want to make clear, even though it's our practice that we officially revisit the policy prioritization plan every quarter, the commission has all the authority at any regular or specially called meeting to change something that it acted on. And so just for what it's worth, I too agree it's important to recognize the necessity of staff to move forward on the conflict of interest review relative to the corruption scandal. And to be clear, even though we didn't meet in June to act on the policy prioritization plan, I would bet anything that Mr. Ford has been attending to those very issues in the 3 months that just passed because the necessity of doing so as the Ethics Commission. So with that, I'm going to recognize, I guess, since I don't know who was first, I'm going to go alphabetically. Commissioner Bush, if you wanted to unmute your mic.
I think I'm unmuted.
Okay.
In terms of legislative action that may require the voters' approval, there's not another election until March of 2022. So anything that we're talking about now is going to have to be passed by the board without having to go to the voters, which means in most cases, campaign finance reforms go to the voters. These conflict of interest don't necessarily go to the voters, but I suppose they could. So that's a reality as a backdrop to all of this.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it does not change my stated observation that we need groups like advisory committees who can clear away some of the clutter. I call it clutter. It's legwork of researching what's going on. If you're talking about conflict of interest and you mentioned travel as an example, what do other jurisdictions require to be disclosed in travel expenses? All we put down is what the sources of funding were and how much each of those funders provided. We do not say, oh yeah, and they spent a $2,000 a night hotel room in Macau, which is something that is disclosed in places like San Diego, where they put a cap on how much money is going to go. That's how, in the past, we've seen conflict of interest emerge, where private interest paid for a mayor to take trips that would go on golfing holidays. And that's the reality. Well, we all know that's what was going on. But none of that was disclosed because we didn't require disclosure of even what was accomplished on the trip. So once you start asking questions about what are you going to do with a conflict of interest, you have to go through behested payments, you have to go through conflict of interest in travel, you have to go through incompatible activities. You know, for example, in statements of incompatible activities now, commissioners can raise money for a charitable entity that is under the jurisdiction of the commission. I can't imagine a more fraught situation for a conflict than being able to raise money for a group that your commission funds for and that you then are fundraising for separately. And yet that's written as an existing loophole. So how are you going to get all of that done in a few months of research, no matter how many people you have doing it? It's going to require people with some real understanding and expertise. So I'm putting my observations and concerns on the record. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are some interesting points that I'm sure Mr. Ford will look at. And Commissioner Chu, if you wanted to go ahead with your comments.
Thank you, Chair Ambrose. The idea of an advisory committee, I think, is an intriguing one because I think that time is of the essence here, given the circumstances that we find ourselves in. And if there's an opportunity to leverage additional expertise to help accelerate the work, I think that is, I think that could be a very good thing and a very beneficial thing. And so my question, I think this would be for Commissioner Bush, is like what would an advisory committee look like, and or to you know, others on the commission or on staff, like who would be tapped to serve on the advisory committee, and also, I mean, Mr. Ford, I would like to ask your opinion as well, in terms of you know, what positives or negatives that you could see with an advisory committee who would be you know, taking your direction in terms of you know, the areas of focus, and that the output would come back to you and then ultimately to the commission for consideration and action. So I guess my first question would be to Commissioner Bush, and what kinds of people, like what does that look like, an advisory committee? And of course, it would have to be of sufficient size in order to be able to get the work done, but not so large that it becomes, you know, inefficient due to you know, the mass. And would like to ask Mr. Ford's opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. To answer with what my own thoughts were about that, I think one place to start would be with former ethics commissioners, people like Ben Hur, who was an excellent chair of the commission, Beverly Hayon, who continues to be a strong interest in ethics issues. So you have former ethics commissioners who understand the commission and understand the workload and know how to work together. There are a number of those former commissioners. As I mentioned before, former civil grand jurors is another pool that we could go to. I've talked to the foreperson for our civil grand jury that did it on ethics, and she is very well versed in it, and she's been an advisory committee member for various estate PUC type entities in the past. So she asked the sensible question, what exactly would you look for an advisory committee to do? What would be its jurisdiction and its timeline? And all that would have to be, I think, tailored specifically to the kind of things that Mr. Ford has put on his agenda, starting with what are the existing policies and practices in other jurisdictions when it comes to conflict of interest. So in addition, if you're just doing basic research, there are people in the city who are well versed with that, but who are not able to come to the office. So they could participate that way. I think that more directly, an advisory committee has to have not an ongoing mission, but a specific mission that's tailored to a timetable and a deliverable. And they would not make anything more than recommendations to come back to the staff and the commission. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you. That was very helpful.
And actually, I'm going to interject here before you respond, Mr. Ford, when we get to the agenda items for new business for the October agenda, we've already discussed, someone's going to make a motion to put on the agenda discussion of possible action on supplemental resources to support commission objectives, which I would put the advisory committee in that list of possible excuse me, initiatives that we might undertake to supplement staff. So I'm going to ask you, Pat, to wait and answer Commissioner Chu's question there, because we do also want to talk about the other policy prioritization item that you're recommending. And then I think we also want to talk about the 6 or 7 things that aren't going to get addressed, or that you're not recommending that you would have the resources to address within the next policy prioritization period. So I want to move along, in other words. So if that's okay, if you could, Pat, take up item B on the plan and present that.
Sure. I just want to make sure I understand you correctly. So we'll talk about the idea of the advisory committee later in today's meeting.
No, what I'm saying is later in today's meeting, when we have the agenda item to identify new business for future commission meetings, based on the discussion we've already, I think we're already anticipating a motion then to put on the calendar for October a specific agenda item to discuss supplemental resources for commission objectives, and that if you can be prepared, should that motion be made and adopted, if you can be prepared to address the question about advisory committees in the October meeting, when that is actually identified and on the agenda for public discussion. Okay?
Gotcha. Totally makes sense. Yeah,
Okay.
I guess, yeah, for purposes of the policy prioritization plan, I guess I would just say that I would probably revise my time estimate. My timeline would be longer. That's all I would say at this point. So to the second project, to the biennial code review, this is something I've mentioned before, so I won't explain it right now, but essentially this is in progress already because it is required by state law. Essentially, I just want it to be recognized as a policy project, since it's something that takes time. It's a legislative project that I basically have to work on every other year. It's important that ethics is involved in it. At this stage, we've already received responses from a good number of departments. Some have not responded. So we are presuming at this point they do not have changes to make. Deputy City Attorney Shen is working on the ordinance. And once that's drafted, then we'll move forward with meet and confer. And as you know, that's a process that can be unpredictable as well. We don't know how the unions will react and how long it will take. But that's something that I'll be involved in as well.
Mm-hmm. And either you or Deputy City Attorney Shen, if you could tell me what is your the ETA for when that ordinance would go to the board? I mean, just quarter of this fiscal year. When do we think that's going to go to the board?
Hi, Chair Ambrose. So our goal is to get it to the board in October. So under state law, we need to make those changes to who needs to file Form 700 by the end of the calendar year.
Oh, so this is immediate.
Yeah, so I think, and Pat can certainly correct me if I'm wrong about this, but it's something that we've actually already been working on for several months because it is a long-term project. And so I think that was already factored into the time estimate.
Okay.
So it is something.
Are you seeing any major changes to the list of? I mean, it tends to be fairly static.
Yeah, so far I haven't seen a lot of dramatic changes, but to be candid with you, a lot of departments are distracted by a lot of things these days, and so I'm not sure how many of them, one, have really had a chance to sit down and look through the listing at all, which may explain some of the non-responses from departments. And otherwise, if a department that has had time to do this, to even look at this matter at all, I expect a lot of those departments haven't had a chance to do a big reorg or add a bunch of new positions or anything like that either. So I'm not expecting a huge amount of change this cycle.
Well, and in part, some of these departments might have been waiting to see what their budget was going to be, which is late this year, before they tell you what positions they still have and how they might be reordering responsibility. On that point, though, to the executive director, tracking when that goes to the board and to committee, I'm assuming that your staff will be prepared, to speak to some of the larger Form 700 issues that we have, when that comes up at the board. I mean, that's an opportunity to get the attention of Form 700 filers, why we do it, what we're trying to accomplish, what our, outreach agenda is. And so if you could just let us know when that engagement happens and how it goes, I'd be interested to see how that plays out. So with that, then I would like you, Pat, to address the, in the chart that you provide, which is really handy, summary, the potential policy projects and the impact and the urgency timeliness. I mean, I gather that 10 it's very urgent, and 3 not so terribly urgent. We've seen these potential policy projects on the potential list now for the since the inception of this list, and I'm just wondering, are there and we can take this up again in October, are there first steps on some of these projects I want you to think about that can be broken out and delegated to somebody, or that we would seek some kind of outside, grant funding to support review of? And again, you don't have to answer that now, but I do want you to give you a chance to speak to these other, what is it, 6 items on the list, so that we have a chance to discuss them.
Sure. So some of them are not specific in nature. I mean, you'll see that some of them refer to entire chapters of the code. Frankly, they're there to just give the commission an idea of things you could do if you wanted to. I mean, the permit consultant program, the lobbying program, those are different areas, really, where policy projects could take place. These aren't targeting any specific issues or aspects of the program that I'm advocating be examined. They're really just here to give you a different avenue. If you look at the projects that I'm proposing and you don't like them, these are where you don't think they're high priority. These are alternatives just basically to jog your thinking and provide alternative avenues. So I'm not saying these 2 projects that I recommend are the only things that could be done, because it's not the case. There's a lot of things that could be done. So that's really what these are. Some of them are specific in nature, and usually that's when a commissioner will express interest in a particular policy project. I will put it on here so that it has a place to live and the commission can discuss it. So for example, at a prior meeting, I can't remember if it was August or July, interest was expressed in looking at online advertisements. So I put that here. At this time, I'm recommending that other projects be pursued right now, just because I think they're more timely and more urgent. But that project is on here so that it's not ignored. It doesn't just go away. It's still here. It's still here in concept form, and upon any motion of a commissioner, it could be moved up into an actual policy project. However, what I would ask that you do then is remove one of the other projects, because we can only do what we can do. To the idea of having outside parties do the policy projects, I mean, certainly people could provide us with information and research at any time, and we'll look at it. But ultimately, we can't really rely on third parties to go through the legislative process for us. Ultimately, the commission would need to vote on any legislation. I presume you would like me to write a report about that. I presume you would still like me to engage with stakeholders, engage with the Board of Supervisors, and inevitably those projects would turn into a full-fledged policy project.
Yeah, no, I think everybody understands that wouldn't be the role of an advisory group. Or, for example, I mean, we're also looking at this question of seeking outside funding for ethics at work, at training. I mean, we have, even in our annual report, a laundry list of things that we're supposed to do under the charter that we haven't been able to get to. So it's not just those issues. So, but and I guess, you know, speaking to your one particular point on political advertisement, as Commissioner Bush pointed out, after the November election, there won't be another local election until 2022. And so that might not be the priority. It might be an opportunity, though, for us to work on some of the lobbying and permit consultant issues that we flagged previously. So with that, I am looking and I see Commissioner Chu, Commissioner Bush, your hand is still up. Is that from before, or do you have something further?
I'm still with you.
What?
I'm still with you.
Okay, so you have a comment, or?
In terms of the policy priorities, I take it that's something we can revisit again next month. And so we're not going to have a vote that's going to lock us in to this list. What we need to lock in now, if I understand the issues that have been raised, is what's going to happen in the next 60 days, essentially by the end of the year.
Mm-hmm.
And once we have that settled now, the rest of it can follow and we can revisit all of those issues. I just want to underscore that after 60 days at the end of the year, everything changes at City Hall. We'll have a new president of the board because Norman Yee's term is up. And so he will be off the board. There are a number of people who are leaving the board. Sandra Feuer has been chair of the budget committee. She's leaving the board. So the chairs not only will change, but in some cases, new board presidents decide what committees will be established to begin with. So that means that almost anything that you're talking about now cannot be aimed at a specific committee or specific members of the board because you don't know who's going to be there. I just think that needs to be put front and center in our planning.
Okay, that's a good point. Unless Director Pelham or Mr. Ford, unless you have any further comments, I do want to entertain a motion to authorize the staff to proceed with the policy prioritization plan items, subject to further direction from the commission as we move forward in this coming quarter. If I can ask if there's a motion along those lines in a second, and then I want to call for public comment. Commissioner Smith and Commissioner, is that a first and a second? No.
I'm seeking to amend your motion to just
Okay, I didn't actually make the motion. I was inviting somebody to make a motion. So you go ahead and make your motion and we'll see if Commissioner Smith still wants to second it. How about that?
My motion would be to proceed for the next 2 months with the plan as outlined before us. And after that, we'll revisit the whole thing. But I'm putting a timeline on it.
All right, so you're saying move the policy prioritization plan with the understanding that we'll bring it back at the December meeting for review and rediscussion. Is that the idea?
So that we don't hold things up for the next 2 months.
Okay, and do I have a second for that motion?
I would second the motion. However, I would offer a friendly amendment to say that we would bring it back, have an interim report in November, because if we wait until December, then we won't be able to have take action. And I mean, we could take action in December, but we're into the holidays, and then it will be January.
I accept that.
Okay. And just to be clear, so me and the staff understand, so we're approving the policy prioritization plan, subject to reconsideration in December and
November.
in November with the staff report and recommendation in November. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. All right. With the motion and second on the floor, then Mr. Moderator, if you could please see if there's any public comment.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, we are checking to see if there are callers in the queue. For those already on hold, please continue to wait until the system indicates you have been muted. If you have just joined this meeting, we are currently on public discussion on the motion of Agenda Item 6, discussion and possible action on monthly staff policy report, including Ethics Commission proposed policy prioritization plan for fiscal year 21. If you have not already done so, please press *3 to be added to the public comment queue. You will have 3 minutes to provide your public comment, 6 minutes if you're online with an interpreter. You will hear a bell go off when you have 30 seconds remaining. Madam Chair, we have a caller in the queue.
Thank you.
Welcome, caller. Your 3 minutes begins now.
So to the Ethics Commission again, we the people, we San Franciscans are really fed up with the Board of Supervisors, fed up with the city attorney, the controller, the Sunshine Task Force, and the Ethics Commission. Why? Let's go back to the 60s when we fought for the Sunshine Task Force, the Ethics Commission, to represent the people. And now that we have the Ethics Commission, y'all are going in circles. Y'all have no understanding that the ship is sinking. Corruption on every level has been encouraged in a way by the city attorney, the controller, and the Ethics Commission. Do you remember when we had the case of Juliet Alice? Y'all sat on it. Y'all were not there, but the others, they sat on it. Because it went to the Fair Political Practices Commission, it was adjudicated. And then when it came back to the Ethics Commission, because the higher, body adjudicated, y'all did nothing about it. Now we have David Anderson, who y'all all should know about. He took it upon himself to charge some people with subpoenas. And you folks, the Ethics Commission, y'all have no information. I think I have more information than y'all will ever have. That's why people say, let a third party do it instead of the staff. The staff is talking about legalese. You will be there forever, 500 years talking about legalese. You have to come up with a solution quickly. As one of your members is saying, quickly. He's informed. He has experience. He knows how the Board of Supervisors this. Your chairperson knows me when she was on the board commission and so on and so forth. We have to move quickly. We have to move on a war footing. We have this enemy. The more time we give the enemy, the more we destroy our democracy. We have to move quickly.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further commentators in the queue, please?
Stand by. Madam Chair, there are no callers in the queue.
All right, then I'm gonna then ask for a roll call vote on item 6 on the motion to, I'm almost afraid to restate it, but a motion to approve the policy prioritization plan subject to reconsideration in November 2020 following a report on progress at that point. Is that clear enough? And with that, if you could please call the roll.
A motion has been made and seconded. Commissioner Bush.
No.
I didn't state it right.
Yeah, it wasn't a reconsideration. It was
Okay.
we're voting for it to exist for the next 2 months with the interim report in November, and then in December we revisit, and then after January we develop what's going to go forward. But it's not to simply reconsider there. It's to start from scratch if that's what we want to do.
Okay. I guess in my mind, reconsideration gives the commission all the jurisdiction that it has, but with that clarification, that was the intent. Is that also the intent of the party who seconded the motion?
Yes.
Okay. Is that clear enough for everyone? So we're talking about approving the policy prioritization plan for the next 60 days, a report in November, and then the commission has all the authority within its jurisdiction to take any action at that time.
I'm okay with that. Thank you.
Is that, and anybody else have a comment on that? Are you comfortable with that, Commissioner Chu is the second?
Yes, I am.
Okay. All right, so then let's start again with the roll call.
A motion has been made and seconded. I will now call the roll. Commissioner Bush.
Yes.
Commissioner Chu.
Aye.
Vice Chair Lee.
Aye.
Commissioner Smith.
Yes.
Chair Ambrose.
Yes.
With 5 votes in the affirmative and 0 votes opposed, the motion is approved unanimously.
All right then, thank you, commissioners. I'm going to call agenda item 7, discussion of the monthly staff enforcement report. Can we have Mr. Pierce make your presentation? And this is a discussion item only. Just a quick point on that. Commissioner Bush had asked that we add and possible action on a number of items. Before I did that with respect to the enforcement report, I wanted to confer with the city attorney and with staff because of the importance of notifying the public when we might take action on a matter before the commission. It's one thing, with the policy prioritization plan or even with the budget, which are fairly discrete topics for where possible action could occur. With the enforcement report, there are individuals, third parties involved who are identified in the staff materials for that agenda item who I think are entitled to more explicit notice if there's a chance that just because their name shows up on an agenda item where you're tracking, the enforcement matter, that we might actually take action with respect to that particular individual case. So anyway, I think we need to do a little bit more work on that before we put that as an action, possible action on every commission agenda. At the same time, I want to point out that if there is something that comes up on that enforcement action staff presentation where we want to take action, the commissioner can identify that and we can calendar a specific action item for the following meeting where we identify substantively who, what, where we're going to discuss and possibly take action. So I just wanted to explain mostly to Commissioner Bush, trying to sort through there before adding that that language. All right. And
if you're asking me, my answer is that I did not contemplate raising questions about any individual. More, it's about the amount of information we're given. But we can talk about it.
Okay. Well, and on that front, I mean, you can definitely comment about what you want to see. It's just if we're going to take a motion and a vote, then we should, identify what that is substantively and put it on the calendar as an action item for the next meeting. So that
I understand.
Okay. All right. Anyway, I just wanted to, and also just think about it. I like the idea of being able to get, the consensus of the commission on specific items. I just think we might need to take a little bit more time to do that. And with that, Mr. Pierce, I'm going to let you talk.
You'll need to unmute yourself, Jeff.
Good afternoon, Chair Ambrose and Commissioners. Thanks for your time today. I will not cover the whole report. It's been made available to you and the public, and I assume that you've had a chance to review it. But I will highlight a couple of things for you. First, with respect to the fixed penalty policy, this month's report provides an update that the executive director and I have had an opportunity. This month's report highlights that the Law and Policy Committee at the Fair Political Practices Commission had intended to take up some potential amendments to their program, and I understand that those amendments staff has proposed based on their 18 months of implementing those programs. An update on that is only that the Law and Policy Committee on Wednesday had to postpone that item to a subsequent meeting. So they did not actually have a substantive discussion on those proposals or on staff's experience to date implementing its streamlined programs. But separate and apart from that, the executive director and I have had a chance to confer about the proposal that staff has been developing internally. The director and I discussed mainly the list of proposed violations that staff has intended to add to the commission's handling of fixed penalty or streamlined resolution of certain matters. And we discussed what the eligibility criteria for those matters might be. And the executive director also focused her feedback on some procedural questions about how in practice staff might sequence or otherwise implement the proposal as written. We will turn next, subject to the director's availability, to reviewing the proposed penalty schedule, which exists in a separate set of regulations that build on the first set regarding the list of violations. And then just one other note, and then I'll solicit any questions from the commission. Commissioner Chu, you had expressed at the last meeting a desire that we report back on whether the Bureau of Delinquent Revenue's soft approach, as they call it, to pursuing debts on behalf of its clients would be impacted by any potential deadlines like statutes of limitations on potential claims that the city might make. And regrettably, the only update I have for you is that we have We have initiated conversations with the Bureau on that question, but we don't have specific substantive information to report back to you at this time.
Okay, although I did see, I had a question on page 4 because Isabel Urbano, the status is that requested TCA recall and abandonment per account past statute of limitations to legally collect. So do I take from that this, we have now timed out and cannot collect the 6850?
That's my read of it as well, but I'm still waiting for more specific detail from the Bureau.
Okay, and so I would then just ask that, you know, in your conversations with them, that we get a sense of the pending matters that they have. What are the statute of limitations, so that we have enough time to make a decision if a deadline is coming up and the Ethics Commission and you will have the opportunity to take it back and pursue alternative methods of collection before we run out of runway.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Chair Ambrose, I have no further updates. So if there are questions from the Commission, I'm happy to entertain them.
You're on mute, Chair Ambrose.
Commissioner Bush, I'm recognizing you. I see your hand up.
Thank you. Just for statistical purposes, when you do a report, could you include the total number of referrals to the attorney and the district attorney that ethics is required to make, the date they were referred, the date they were returned, and whether they've been held for further investigations? That would be stripped of any identifiers, but just the numbers so we can see what the track looks like. Thank you.
So just to confirm, Commissioner Bush, you would like to see the report include effectively the number of investigations that the Commission has formally opened on a monthly basis and the dates on which we open it. That's our interpretation of the charter, is that the date on which we refer a matter to the city attorney and district attorney is effectively the date on which we open an investigation of our own. So you would like specific reporting about the number, the date of those referrals, and any that the city attorney or district attorney has requested that we not investigate, to give them time to do so.
Yes, isn't there like a 60-day time period, and then at that point the Commission can undertake its own parallel investigation? I don't know if it's 60 days or 90 days. There was some set period that was voted on by the Commission earlier.
That's correct, and I recall that last month you had raised a similar question, and yeah, we can likely include that information in subsequent reports. To your question about the number of referrals that the city attorney or district attorney have asked the Ethics Commission to stand down on, I did look at that, and there are, I believe, only 3 matters on our docket for which the city attorney or district attorney wishes to be first in line. But if that statistic remains of interest, we can look at how best to report it.
It is of interest. I think it helps the public understand when something is not moving forward, that it's not because it's sitting in our desk. Thank you.
Thanks.
Are there any other questions or comments from other commissioners? The one question I had, Jeff, it concerns the enforcement by the Commission on whistleblower retaliation, since we don't do the initial whistleblower investigation. That's the controller and the city attorney's office. But if there is a whistleblower and they allege that they've been retaliated against, then the commission has a role there. And as our one public commenter had called out, and I think and Commissioner Bush brought to my attention, there is an interesting article in the West Side Observer that specifically speaks to the commission's role in that regard, and broadening the my interest in that is more broad, in that what we're seeing from both the controller and the city attorney's report is that following the resignation of the department heads from DBI and DPW, and just in general, given the public attention to the corruption scandal, there's I want to say, tenfold increase in whistleblower complaints, filed in the city, bringing information forward. And in light of that, I think we have a responsibility to review and anticipate how we engage with the controller and city attorney's office about those matters, and I guess also with the Department of Human Resources, because they are on the front lines of working with staff and managers on with the individual who is alleging retaliation. Certainly DHR shouldn't know that they made a whistleblower complaint, but they will hear about it if they allege that they're being retaliated because of it. In any event, I just want to highlight for you, Mr. Pierce, that I think it's critically important that we somehow get the message out to folks that we will support and stand by anyone who feels that they have information to bring forward about allegations of wrongdoing. And if you want to, work with Director Pelham and think about how best we can communicate that, I think that would be time well spent. With that, I'm going to ask the moderator to call for public comment on this item number, I've lost track, 7.
Madam Chair, we are checking to see if there are callers in the queue. For those already on hold, please continue to wait until the system indicates you have been unmuted. If you have just joined this meeting, we are currently on the public discussion on the motion of agenda item number 7, discussion of monthly staff enforcement report. If you have not already done so, please press *3 to be added to the public comment queue. You will have 3 minutes to provide your public comment, 6 minutes if you are online with an interpreter. You will hear a bell go off when you have 30 seconds remaining. Please stand by. Once again, if you have joined this meeting, we are currently on public discussion on the motion of agenda item number 7, discussion of monthly staff enforcement report. If you have not already done so, please press *3 to be added to the public comment queue. You will have 3 minutes to provide your public comment, 6 minutes if you are online with an interpreter. You will hear a bell go off when you have 30 seconds remaining. Madam Chair, there are no more callers.
All right, then public comment is closed for item number 7. Thank you, Mr. Pierce. And I'm going to call agenda item 8, discussion of executive director's report an update of various programmatic and operational highlights of Ethics Commission staff activities since the Commission's previous meeting, and that would be Executive Director Pelham. Presentation. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Chair Ambrose. The monthly report in your packets or on the agenda this month is relatively brief. I won't recap the budget information I highlighted here in case this is where people look for their budget updates. There is some information there. A quick update on the public financing program since last month's commission meeting. As of yesterday, as of actually September the 9th, excuse me, September the 9th was the last day on which candidates running for the November election could be determined to be eligible for the program. And as of the 9th, we now have 15 of the 22 candidates who agreed to participate in the program and are on the ballot. 15 of those 22 Board of Supervisorial candidates are now participating eligibly. Were determined as eligible to be participants in the program. So that's 68% participation rate, which is good. I think that's going to be really interesting to look at over time if the new program provisions that were enacted for this year have helped people get into the program in a constructive way. Together, that group of 15 is now qualified for almost $2.5 million. So we will now turn to continue to handle public financing matching claims that are coming in. There is a provision in the law that says if a candidate who is deemed to be ineligible through our review by the September 9th date, wishes to have that determination appealed, there is a process to do that. So if there is something that comes our way, it would be something that the commission would have a role in. We will bring that to you at the next month's meeting should that occur. But I just wanted to highlight that for you since we now have now passed another key milestone in the public financing program for this year's election. I don't think I have anything else to report from this on this item, so I'm happy to take any questions if you have them for me.
I'm gonna review hands. That would be Commissioner Bush and Commissioner Lee both have questions.
Sorry, I didn't take a hand down.
Okay, that would be Commissioner Lee. Go ahead, if you unmute yourself, there you go.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think my fellow commissioners have made, several comments that I have supported, which along the lines of, we may be doing a lot of good work, but very few people know about it, or there are a lot of things that the general public really should know about. So I would renew my recommendations that we step up on our educational outreach activities, especially now with remote connections. I think it may be a little bit easier to organize them. So I would suggest on the short term, given all the attention on the election and everything else, that the staff would put together two ongoing activities. Number one, to really resume our press briefings, one before the election, the second one post-election, to really let people know that, hey, we're relevant, and more importantly, there's a vehicle for the public to report or to share their suggestions on clean government and clean elections. So I would really hope to see that we would have the couple of press briefings taking place. And when I say press briefings, I also want to emphasize we're talking about neighborhood, social media, and ethnic media who are really key to getting the information out to basically a silent or underserved community in the city. The second thing is we talked about these ongoing persons of interest briefings or information gatherings. I also felt that we need to expand the definition of persons of interest. It seems like, of course, the people in the front line are the ones who really, need the information the most. But I would like to see persons of interest expanded to include civic organizations, political organizations, bipartisan, because those are the ones who may not be the lobbyists, who may not be actually running for office, but they are supporting electoral reform, government reform, different activities, and they may have a lot more experience and information to share if they were part of these in-person briefings. And I would love to see that, yes, we have a very limited budget, but I just think that we're already doing these things. It's just a matter of expanding it to be more inclusive so that, we could raise the profile, get the community more energized, get them to know what the Ethics Commission actually does and how they can really help to make us more stronger and more connected to the people who are impacted.
Thank you, Commissioner Lee. That is, I very much appreciate and share that perspective. And my hope is that we, with remote technology as a start, may be able to do more of that with resources that we have currently. So I would look forward to reporting back to you all on what progress we can make across that front as well.
Yeah, I think those are all really good suggestions. Commissioner Chu, can I recognize you? Did you have a question or comment?
I did, yes, thank you. And Executive Director Pelham, if I could be helpful in any way in participating in these community outreach meetings, I'd be delighted to do so. And I agree, in the silver lining, I think, as part of this pandemic shutdown is that the proliferation of online meetings and outreach digitally or virtually, I think is a real game changer in terms of being able to reach more people. People might not be able to come to a meeting because they have childcare or they have to work, but the convenience of doing it from home on a phone or a tablet or a laptop, I think reduces those barriers, and we can take advantage of that in this time. I think that would be really great. And I actually had a second question for Executive Director Pelham on the director's report. I see that there is a budget item for a statement of economic interest filings, the late fees. And I know that there was a number of Form 700 filers who did not file. I don't know if you know, or if you don't off the top of your head, that's fine. If you could report on it next month, I'd be interested to know of the 7% who didn't file, how many still are outstanding, and what efforts are being made to get them to file.
Thank you. I believe last week I understood that out of the 18 identified last month as electronic filers who had not filed, I believe the number last week had gone down to 14. I don't have today's current numbers, but we have followed up with all filers to give them essentially a 60-day notice. The next notice would be communication from our enforcement division. So we will be following up on that and reporting back as we can on that front.
Could we also send a note, not just to the filer themselves, but to their boss, to their appointing elected?
I believe that notice was provided as well as part of the second notice. Yeah.
And I don't know if this has been done before, but is it possible to publish a list of those who have not filed on our website?
Yes, and I'll follow up with our office once we know how many people that is. We do have unfortunately, it's a ridiculously cumbersome way to find that, so we do need to make it simpler. I didn't include that list in this month's report. We were waiting to see how many actually did file before we had that subsequent list to report, as I did last month. But we can find a place on our website to update that information more easily.
Or tweet it out and let their legislative aides know that we have they've been called out in the Twitter sphere that for failing to have filed.
I think most of the people on the list actually are Board or Commission members. Last I saw it. So we'll get back that information back to you and try and share that more publicly.
And have we been reminding them that they are not permitted to vote?
Yes, and we've also shared that information with the city attorney's office so that if there are city attorneys that advise those commissions, they can also make sure that they have that information at the time should there be an action that somebody might be taking. There's also some on that list, I think, who have left office, but even so, they still have an obligation to file, which is why we're trying to be in communication with them and to follow up as needed.
Right, and then if there are commissioners or others who have not filed and have continued to participate in meetings and votes, what actions can we take, or what consequences follow from that?
Individuals who have not filed one of their statements or their certification of training are disqualified under the provisions of the law from acting and participating. So we can come back. I mean, our advice to somebody who calls our office about whether they should be acting, our advice is no, you're disqualified from acting per the language of the ordinance, and we would advise them to not take action. If somebody had taken action when they were disqualified under the law, that's something that we would follow up with through the usual channels that we have to determine whether or not a violation occurred, and if so, should a penalty apply, and if so, what that is. So I think I'd leave it as a general statement at this point about that, or we would follow our normal practices with regard to looking at whether violations occurred if people haven't followed the practices or the terms of the provisions that we have jurisdiction over.
Can you, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Can you, I'd be curious, not just, I wouldn't recognize the names, I'm sure, and what organization they were associated, but if you're saying they're board and commission members, next month, in terms of the outstanding list, can you tell us which boards and commissions these individuals serve on? And if they have resigned and have not filed their leaving office statement, presumably they have given a notice of resignation. I just getting to that point of, I'd like to know how many, if any, of these non-filers are actually active members of existing boards and commissions, and if so, which boards and commissions those are. Okay?
Okay, we'll report next month. Thank you.
All right, and so now we're going to ask for public comment on this item. I'm sorry, Commissioner Bush, your hand is up. Go ahead.
It is. Thank you. I just want to associate myself with Commissioner Lee's comments about greater outreach. My thought on that is that our interested persons meetings right now are pretty much reactive, where we invite people to come in and give their reactions to proposals from the staff or the commission to change regulations or laws or so forth. I think it would be a very good idea to have an interested persons meeting in which the community came to us with what they think needs to be added to the work of the Ethics Commission, knowing that we have no resources, but nevertheless, we do need to take a pulse from them about what they see is going on and that they would like to see greater activity from. Now, since that has to be pretty much a virtual meeting, it's something that could also be done by sending out questions, as Commissioner Lee is suggesting that we do an outreach to community-based groups that are politically active and others, asking them directly. We could have someone develop a series of questions, or it could be open-ended where they give us an essay. But I think that we should do something like that, and I would recommend that we add that to our list for the next meeting. I'm taking my hand down.
Let me just, I'm gonna, when we call the next agenda item, I'm gonna ask you to restate that, okay? For the next meeting, we're gonna discuss the agenda items, the new business that we want at the next meeting. All right, can I then go ahead and call for public comment on agenda item number 8, I think this is.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, we are checking to see if there are callers in the queue. For those already on hold, please continue to wait until the system indicates you have been unmuted. If you have joined this meeting, we are currently on the public discussion on the motion of agenda item number 8, discussion of Executive Director's report, an update of various programmatic and operational highlights of Ethics Commission staff activities since the Commission's previous meeting. If you have not already done so, please press *3 to be added to the public comment queue. You will have 3 minutes to provide your public comment, 6 minutes if you are online with an interpreter. You will hear a bell go off when you have 30 seconds remaining. Please stand by.
Thank you.
Once again, for the general public, if you have just joined this meeting, we are currently on public discussion on the motion of agenda item 8, discussion of Executive Director's report, an update of various programmatic and operational highlights of Ethics Commission staff activities since the Commission's previous meeting. Please continue to stand by. Madam Chair, there are no callers in the queue.
Thank you. With that, then I am going to call agenda item 9, and that would be discussion and possible action on items for future meetings. And I'm going to, there's no presentation. If any members of the public intend to offer public comment for this item, they can dial in now and enter *3 to be added to the public comment queue. And now I'm going to ask fellow commissioners if they have items for future meetings. All right, and Commissioner Bush, you're first with your hand up, so if you could go ahead.
Thank you. I'd like to add a request that we look at the redistricting task force and whether or not its activities are covered by our laws on lobbying. Is it okay or not okay to lobby or give gifts to members of the redistricting task force? That will be appointed in the next period of, I think, in March, according to the law. Also, I'd like to see us add to the groups like permit expediters and lobbyists, strategic advisors. Strategic advisors are the classic revolving door group. They are often the most senior officials in the mayor's office or in departments who then do not engage in direct lobbying of their former colleagues, but provide advice to a company or an entity on how to accomplish something at City Hall. And you can see that they advertise themselves as strategic advisors. This is not a mystery. So I'd like that to be added to the thing. And as I just talked about, a community IP meeting, which is an outreach to the community of what it is that people think needs to be given priority consideration by the Ethics Commission. We did something similar to this with the General Obligation Bond Oversight Committee when I served on it, where we did a survey of whether or not people felt what they got with bond spending was what they had expected to get, which is a sort of an after-action report. So I know that the money exists to do those kinds of surveys. It usually exists from the Controller's Office. The General Bond Oversight Committee would often return up to $2 million in unspent funding that could go back to the city, and some of that could be tapped for us to do surveys. Thank you.
Okay. So those are, I mean, in terms of the substantive question you asked about redistricting, I'm assuming that between Director Pelham, her staff, and the city attorney's office, they'll be able to provide and answer that question when we meet again in October. On your proposal to address the strategic advisors, I would ask Mr. Ford in your policy staff report next month, in addition to giving us some feedback on what the utilization of advisory committees might mean to the work that you are charged to do, what that legislative effort, because that would require legislation to amend the rules to require disclosure for these individuals who hire themselves out as strategic advisors on City Hall. So if you could, just, if not a proposal, be prepared to speak to that subject. And then with respect to the community IP meeting, I think Executive Director Pelham, we've heard you tell us that improving outreach and communications is on your agenda going forward, is clearly on the agenda of the commissioners, to broaden our outreach per Commissioner Lee's points, and then Commissioner Bush now with this idea borrowed from the Bond Oversight Committee of tapping into some kind of community feedback loop on what they understand we do and what they think we should be doing. That's yet another idea. So what I'm getting out of all this is, I know in November we're going to be looking at the policy prioritization plan report on the agenda again. In October, I think we had a general discussion that we're going to see a discussion and possible action on this idea of supplemental resources to submit to support commission objectives. And that could be both advisory committees as well as grant funding, bequested payments, et cetera. I mean, I understand that this is a commission initiated item, and so I'm not expecting a fulsome staff report or presentation, but we want it on the agenda with enough clarity so that we can brainstorm about all the possible ways that we might enhance, our being able to achieve the mission with the limited resources that the Ethics Commission is being given. And then I also have a note here, I'm sorry, Form 700 answer. Somebody asked a question about Form 700 that I thought we were going to try and get answered at a future meeting. Is that triggering anybody else's memory cells?
It may have been me raising the question of to what extent can the Form 700 accommodate specific San Francisco laws, like disclosure of being on a board with
that's it.
people where you have regular contact.
So on that point then, not 1:30, so I'm assuming our Deputy City Attorney Shin is still there. If you, together with ethics staff, can be prepared to explain to us the Form 700, the rules. There's also the question about whether or not we are being encouraged or directed at a certain date to have everyone file electronically. And then the other question about if one wanted to add additional disclosure obligations, would you do that through the Form 700 or through some other disclosure? So if you can speak to that when we get back together again on October, don't know what the actual date is, but second Friday in October. And I think that's all I have. Is there anything else that folks think that we need to? Up, Commissioner Lee. You need to unmute yourself. There you go.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a quick question for the Executive Director. Since the November election is expected to be a little bit of a challenge in many ways, with mail-in and everything else, and on top of that, our meeting is going to be less than 2 weeks away from the election. So I wonder if we should push back the November meeting to a week if the system is still available for us to do the change, because I'm just concerned if staff would be able to have such a short turnaround from the election or commission meeting all within less than 2 weeks.
Okay, so our meeting, we also, now that I look at this, there's a holiday, although what does that mean anymore now that we can't even leave our houses to
Every day's a holiday.
do anything, given the fires. So the next meeting would be October 9th, which is the Friday before Indigenous Peoples Day on October 12th. So I'm assuming we're all good for that meeting on the 9th. No one's going away for a long weekend somewhere where you aren't allowed to go. And then so you're saying Election Day is on the 3rd, Veterans Day is on November 11th, and we would otherwise meet on November 13th. And you're suggesting that we push that
Are we
back?
meeting on the 13th?
Yeah, we wouldn't meet till November 13th. Not the 6th, it would be the 13th.
Yeah, I'm just saying it's still less than 2 weeks from the election.
Right. I don't have any problems moving it back to the 20th, that we don't have to take any action on that now. Why don't we just talk about that again in October? And by then, everybody will have a chance to look at your calendar, and we can hear from staff on that. So is that okay, Commissioner Lee, if we take it up in October? Okay. Very good. Is there anything else that we want to put forward for a future agenda? And if not, I'm going to call for public comment.
I do see Commissioner Bush's hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, sorry, I just forgot to take it down.
Okay, all right. Go ahead then, moderator, if you can see if there's any commentators in the queue.
Madam Chair, we are checking to see if there are callers in the queue. For those already on hold, please continue to wait until the system indicates you have been unmuted. If you have just joined this meeting, we are currently on public discussion on the motion of agenda item number 9, discussion and possible action on items for future meetings. If you have not already done so, please press *3 to be added to the public comment queue. You will have 3 minutes to provide your public comment, 6 minutes if you are online with an interpreter. You will hear a bell go off when you have 30 seconds remaining. Please stand by. Once again, for the general public, if you have just joined this meeting, we are currently on the public discussion on the motion of agenda item number 9, discussion and possible action of items for future meetings. Also, as a reminder, public comment may also be submitted in writing and will be shared with the Commission after this meeting has concluded and will be included as part of the official meeting file. Written comments should be sent to ethics.commission@sfgov.org. Once again, written comments should be sent to ethics.commission@sfgov.org. Please continue to stand by. Madam Chair, there are no callers in the queue.
All right then, with that then, I'm going to call agenda item 10, which is an additional opportunity for public comment on matters appearing or not appearing on the agenda pursuant to Ethics Commission Bylaws, Article 7, Section 2. If any member of the public intends to offer public comment for this item, they should dial in now and enter *3 to be added to the public comment queue. Did I call that right? Is that agenda item 10 or is that 11? I'm sorry. Yeah, agenda
You are
item 10.
correct. Item 10, you are correct.
Okay.
All right.
So,
Madam Chair.
so,
Madam Chair, we are checking to see if there are callers in the queue. For those already on hold, please continue to wait until the system indicates you have been unmuted. If you have just joined this meeting, we are currently on public discussion on the motion of agenda item number 10, additional opportunities for public comment on matters appearing or not appearing on the agenda pursuant to the Ethics Commission Bylaws, Article 7, Section 2. If you have not already done so, please press *3 to be added to the public comment queue. You will have 3 minutes to provide your public comment, 6 minutes if you're online with an interpreter. You will hear a bell go off when you have 30 seconds remaining. Please stand by. Once again, if you have just joined this meeting, we are currently on public discussion on the motion of agenda item 10, additional opportunity for public comment on matters appearing or not appearing on the agenda pursuant to the Ethics Commission Bylaws, Article 7, Section 2. A friendly reminder once again, please, public comment may also be submitted in writing and will be shared with the Commission after this meeting has concluded and will be included as part of the official meeting file. Written comments should be sent to ethics.commission@sfgov.org. Once again, written comments should be sent to ethics.commission@sfgov.org. Please continue to stand by. Madam Chair, there are no callers in the queue.
all right then. I do just want to say, everyone, take good care. The air quality statewide is between hazardous and very hazardous, and we all need to be extra careful, and also our thoughts go with the people who don't have a place to hide out from the air. With that, I can adjourn the meeting if I have a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
All right, second by Commissioner Bush and Smith. All right, the meeting is adjourned. We'll see you all on October 9th. Stay safe. All right.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.